Ottawa.
On 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Wednesday, February 3rd. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, -4 degrees. Here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. Bands from a nor'easter that pounded some American states and portions of the Maritimes forced the cancellation of school buses in our outlying areas of the city this morning. There was also a travel advisory for a time along the St. Lawrence due to snow and blowing snow. That came to an end about an hour ago. City News meteorologist Jill Taylor breaks down the weather for us for the rest of the day.
Improvement as we work through the rest of the morning into the afternoon, and then generally just cloudy conditions. But again, the bulk of the snow south of Ottawa, east of the area as well, slowly tapering, and conditions will improve as we work through the afternoon.
Now, there were some slippery sections in the city by early this morning. We had close to 3 centimeters of snow. It was just enough to make the roads greasy. Right now, 417 collision. This is eastbound at Palladium to watch for. Also, Carp Road, on-ramp to the 417, and westbound at Castleman. And then on the 401 eastbound, one lane has opened now after a jackknifed tractor trailer. That happened a little bit earlier this morning. With children in the capital back at school, Ottawa Public Health has released a report. It details the health unit's fight against COVID-19 in schools. The report shows the vast majority of students who did contract COVID did not catch the virus at school. Here is City News reporter Chris Curries.
85% of students who tested positive for COVID-19 contracted the virus in settings outside of schools, while over half of the 55 outbreaks identified by OPH only involved 2 people. Ottawa's medical officer of health, Dr. Vera Etches, says the transmission in schools peaked in early October and dropped after that, and is appreciative of parents' efforts amid the return to school.
I want to thank parents for getting back into the habit of daily screening of children for symptoms of COVID before they go to school. And if your child meets the criteria, seek testing right away.
The doctor adds the data from the report, along with the negative impacts of closures on kids' mental health, supports the move to reopen schools in Ottawa. Chris Curries, City News.
Well, house parties and gatherings for the Super Bowl, another of the pandemic-affected events now in the United States, for example. Dr. Anthony Fauci's advice is, quote, just lay low. America's top infectious disease expert says now is not the time to invite people over to watch the game because of the possibility they're infected with the coronavirus, and that could sicken others.
Watch the Super Bowl on TV, enjoy it, have a party in your house with your family, with the people who are there. But the one thing you don't want to do, don't want to be, somebody that's putting a damper on anything, but you don't want parties with people that you haven't had much contact with.
Now, Fauci says big events like Sunday's game in Tampa between the Chiefs and the Buccaneers always a cause for concern. City News time, 9:03. The OPP in Renfrew looking for some help. They're investigating large rocks which were left on Highway 15. Traffic hazard was found in Whitewater Township earlier this month. Now, police say 2 vehicles were damaged when the large rocks were placed on the highway just before 2 o'clock in the morning of Friday, January 8th. Anyone who has information is asked to contact the Renfrew detachment of OPP, or you can contact Crime Stoppers. OPP also investigating theft of a snowmobile from a business on Pembroke Street in the Laurentian Valley Township. Police say a gray 2018 Arctic Cat Pantera 6000 was stolen from the lot of an automotive dealer in the early morning hours back on January 31st. Anyone with information asked to contact the OPP, or once again, you can get in touch with Crime Stoppers. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Separating headlines
from hearsay.
It's the Rob Snow Show on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
A little on the greasy side in the south end this morning. And slip sliding away. You feel like a Paul Simon song? The nearer your destination, the more you're slip sliding away. Good morning. Rob Snow Show, Rogers TV, City News. Great to be back with you again today. Thank you so much for spending some quality time with us. I don't think we'll let you down. We have some great material ready to go. Don Drummond's on our program this morning. Don Drummond is one of the country's most trusted names in the field of economics. He is a former top person in the Department of Finance under Paul Martin, when Paul Martin was Minister of Finance. You remember during the downsizing days? For a long time, he was the chief economist at the Toronto Dominion Bank, these days a professor at Queen's University. We're going to talk about how the Bank of Canada had to bail out Newfoundland and Labrador. Those are my words, not his. Bailout. Mr. Drummond has just co-authored a report for the C.D. Howe Institute. It's called The Rock in a Hard Place. And he says it didn't happen overnight. Newfoundland and Labrador's current problems actually go back almost a decade, and then the pandemic hit, and it just made what was already a bad situation fiscally, it just made it that much worse. And he says if something drastic isn't done for Newfoundland and Labrador with its budget in the next 4 years, just the interest payments on the province's debt will consume 14 cents of every dollar, just the interest on the provincial debt. And I mean, one of the questions that I will have for Mr. Drummond is, when you look across the country, is Newfoundland just the outlier? Or could other provinces face a similar fate? So don't miss that. It's coming up in about 10 minutes from now. We will help you score your political fix. If you are a political junkie, you have come to the right place today. Polls, polls, polls. Oh, we got polls. Polls are for dogs. But the polls, let's face it, the polls, they've been coming up roses for the Trudeau Liberals lately. I know that's frustrating for those of you who cheer for the team in blue, or those of you who cheer for the team in orange or green. Pick your color. I mean, but look at some of the recent polls. Let me break them down for you. Okay, we have the most recent Leger Canadian Press poll. Liberals 37, Conservatives 28. Yikes, 28. NDP 22. That's a pretty good number for the NDP. Campaign research, Liberals 34, Conservatives 30, NDP 19. Ecos, which is usually friendly to the Liberals, Liberals 34, Conservatives 30. NDP 15. Angus Reid Institute, Liberals 35, Conservatives 30, NDP 20. Main Street Research, Liberals 39, Conservatives 32, NDP 14. So, look, it's the Liberals right now. It's the Liberals' race to lose if the race is on, if there's an election in the spring, for example. But don't you ever, I'm sure you do this, especially my friends on the right side of things. I hear it from you every day. Don't you just ever kind of hit the pause button and ask yourself, why are the Liberals winning? Why, if an election was today, why would the Liberals be rewarded with a majority government? Just given the state of affairs. You know, the vaccine rollout, for example, which we will get into again in a big, big way, make no mistake. Canada's vaccination program is not rocking anyone's world. It is a maddening fiasco with each passing day. The second wave, worse than the first, and some in the medical field are already warning us that there could be a third wave. It'll be worse than the second wave, which was worse than the first. Lord have mercy on our souls. The budget has been just blown to smithereens to deal with all of this. Massive debt, massive deficit, tax hikes are on the way, carbon tax is going up. The Line 5 story, and I have to start paying attention to that one. That is about to explode on the scene. It's kind of flying under the radar right now, overshadowed by all things COVID. But that has the potential to deal Canada another huge blow. Line 5 pipeline it's probably the single most important piece of energy infrastructure in the entire country. Facing closure. But over and above, just think bigger picture, okay? Bigger picture. Is the healthcare system any better than it was when Trudeau took office? Is it any better now? Do you have your universal pharmacare? No, you don't. Is the country more united now? Or is it as divided as it's ever been? Is it the most divided it's ever been? When has it been more divided? 1995, Quebec referendum, early 80s, National Energy Program, 1980, first Quebec referendum. We have Atlantic bubbles. We have Wexit movements. We have Quebec doing whatever it is Quebec wants to do. I mean, whatever it wants to do on language, on culture, on immigration, on energy development, on all of these things. And yet, this spring, there could be an election, and the headline the next morning could be, not to say it will be, it could be, Trudeau in a landslide. Trudeau in a landslide. Why are the Liberals winning? Some Canadians have been asking since Confederation. So that's ahead, coming up after the 9:30 news. Look, the wild card for everything in the country right now, to me, that's why I'm spending a lot of time on it. I'm sorry if I sound like a broken record, but to me, the whole thing is the vaccine situation. How many times over the last year have we been told life will only get back to normal when people are vaccinated? How many times did you hear? Hundreds of times? Thousands of times by now? That's why I'm getting into it with you again today. Yes, again, today, Rob Snow's talking about vaccines. Is there a more important story? What's a more important story than getting as many Canadians vaccinated as soon as possible? You tell me what that story is. And the big angle yesterday is Trudeau Rideau Cottage announcing the facility in Montreal, the National Research Center site in Montreal. Great news, my fellow Canadians. Made in Canada vaccines coming your way by summertime. And by summertime, the Prime Minister actually means Christmas time. Christmas in July. No, actual Christmas time. Like not backyard swimming pool time, backyard skating rink time. That's when this place is going to be open. Best case scenario. Vaccines by the summer. By the summer, the Prime Minister actually means the winter. He doesn't even know. He doesn't even know. He doesn't even know. He calls the media there to make a big announcement. He doesn't even know. He doesn't even know his own timeline.
In regards to specific timelines, I think the ministers who are up after me will be able to speak more to it. But my understanding is the production facility should be completed
the Prime Minister.
This summer. And once certification is made, we should then be able to start producing the vaccines here in Canada reasonably quickly after that. But for better timelines, you can ask the ministers.
Ask the ministers. My people take care of the details. Look, ladies and gentlemen, look around. The whole vaccine rollout plan is going south in a hurry, and you might want to go south in a hurry. You got a better chance of getting a shot. The state of Illinois has a population that's about 25% the population of Canada. This has about 10 million people. We have almost 40 million here. State of Illinois has administered more doses of vaccine than we have in all of Canada. We haven't even administered 1 million doses of vaccine in Canada. More than 1 million doses of vaccine administered just in the state of Illinois. But look, here's what I want to ask you today. Kind of get the conversation going during the talkback hour. We do that every morning between 10 and 11 o'clock at 750-1310. Take your calls. Express yourselves. Email The Rob Snow Show, ottawa.citynews.ca, 750-1310, the call-in line. This announcement by Mr. Trudeau yesterday. Okay, we need domestic production capacity for vaccines in Canada. Yes, we do. For coronavirus vaccines in Canada. Yes, we do. This may not be the last coronavirus pandemic that we ever have to face. So you could look at it as an investment in the future. I want to know, do you view this announcement yesterday, is this good news or bad news? What Mr. Trudeau announced yesterday. To me, the whole thing is an embarrassment. His government should be so far ahead of where it is now, it should actually feel embarrassed, but of course, they're incapable of shame. If I was to be kind, I'm not really known for that, but if I was to be kind, give the government a break, cut it some slack, I could call it good news. There will be a facility. It will eventually open in Montreal. It will make doses of COVID-19 vaccine, maybe by September. And then we won't have to worry as much about supply shortages of vaccine nationalism in the sour side of the EU, if I was to be kind. On the other hand, I'm pretty familiar with all the twists and the turns and the curiosities of this file because I read the news every day. And the fact is, December's a long way off. A lot of things could go bad between now and then. December 3rd, for example, is 303 days from now. Who knows what the world is going to look like in 303 days? What kind of variants will be circulating in the country? What kind of supply chain disruptions could occur? Anything could happen that could derail even the best laid plans. And by December of this year, December 2021, it will have been 20 months since the declaration of this pandemic. 20 months to open one building to make some vaccine for Canadians in Canada. So I kind of lean to this being a bad news kind of story, but what do you think? The vaccine plant planned for Montreal. Good news, bad news? Is it really that complicated? Rob Snow Show. City News.
The Rob Snow Show.
I always knew I was going to own my own business, and I've always wanted to have a store. And I sort of figured when the right concept came together at the right time, I would move forward with that plan. And so through doing some environmental initiatives in the restaurant group that I was with prior to opening this store, it just triggered my path towards being more environmentally conscientious and wanting to make more of a difference, and hopefully encouraging, inspiring other people to want to do the same, at which point the idea for All Eco was born. I have some really fun products. I have a really wide spectrum of products. So the things we look for in terms of qualifying products are sustainably made, upcycled, recycled, zero waste, all natural, no harmful chemicals to like the environment or to our bodies. We have like fun stuff, so like really clean burning candles, lots of really natural body care and skin care. I put a real emphasis on Canadian products. I really try to support up and comers, and I always source Canada first. The refill bar is really important to me. It's really huge. I think that's been exciting as well because I thought it was going to be a real process in convincing people that this is a better way to go. And actually it was just like right away there was a built-in affinity towards doing refill, which has been great. We closed, I think, probably we were closed down by before the second week of March. Just didn't feel we could comfortably or confidently stay open, even though I do sell essential products, like in terms of the cleaning. But we just didn't feel we could make a safe space for ourselves or our customers at that time, and especially with the information we had at the time. So we did close our doors, at which point I did not have a website because that was I hadn't even scheduled myself to have a website at that point. So that was sort of like full speed moving towards that and trying to drive the business at the same time, still get myself on the map because I was so new. So during that time, as we were building the website, we were still doing a lot of video shopping and private shopping, online shopping, like online phone, text. Any way I could do business, I was doing it. And there was really a nice show of support for my business during that time, which was really, really encouraging. And now, we are fully set up online too.
He's the opinionated Ottawa icon.
The Rob Snow Show returns
On Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
What went wrong, fiscally speaking, for the province of Newfoundland and Labrador? There's a new report about that. It's from the C.D. Howe Institute. It has been co-authored by Don Drummond, the Stauffer Dunning Fellow in Global Public Policy, adjunct professor at the School of Policy Studies, Queen's University. Good morning, Professor Drummond.
Good morning to you.
Yeah, it's very nice to hear from you.
Thank you.
What went wrong for Newfoundland and Labrador? You trace it back to 2012, 2013. What was happening then?
Well, of course, we could go right back to Confederation, or at least when Newfoundland and Labrador joined Canada. We won't go that far. We only have a certain amount of time. But they have historically been inclined to deficits. But they weren't in bad fiscal shape as the beginning of the 2010s decade. And then in 2012, 2013, they slipped into deficit. And then, of course, they really got hammered, as did other oil producers in late 2014, 2015, with the decline in oil prices. At one time, their offshore oil royalties were almost $3 billion a year, and they're only estimated to be $500 million this year. But when the royalties soared to $3 billion, they essentially spent the proceeds. They increased largely the number of people working for the government and the pay of the people that are working for the government, and they've largely kept that spending structure in place as the offshore royalties have declined, hence creating this imbalance. And then, of course, like every other jurisdiction in Canada, got hammered again by COVID, but COVID certainly didn't begin the fiscal problems.
How likely is it that Newfoundland and Labrador was already on an unsustainable fiscal footing even before COVID?
Oh, I think absolutely it was an unsustainable fiscal footing before that. It had a very high debt ratio. It was paying about 15 cents of every revenue dollar they collected went to pay an interest in the public debt. So it's pretty hard to run a government when you take money from people and you only give 85 cents of it for every dollar back to goods and services. That makes it tough. And then, of course, they've got the debt from Muskrat Falls hanging over their heads. In theory, that is supposed to be addressed through electricity prices, but that would require a doubling of electricity prices. So in addition to all the other economic challenges, that would just really cripple the economy of the province. And then if they don't cover for the electricity prices, I mean, they have to cut it for taxes, and their tax burden is already fairly high. So, yeah, they had numerous problems. And, of course, this is the lesson, really, that COVID shows you, that crises do happen, and you want to be in reasonably good shape when you're not in crises so you can handle the crises, and they were not in that good shape before COVID hit them and everyone else.
Professor Drummond, I use the term bailout. When the Bank of Canada had to step in, as it did, and buy the provincial bonds from the government of Newfoundland and Labrador because it was having trouble selling them in the bond market, in the international bond market. I call that a bailout. How would you describe it? Is that an accurate term in your opinion?
No, certainly not the Bank of Canada's action. They were buying them, but still interest has to be paid. It's just paid to somebody else. It just ensured that there was a liquid market. That didn't really save anybody. Okay. We've actually never had a federal bailout. There was discussion of that way back in 1992 with Saskatchewan. It appeared to be literally on bankruptcy, but then Roy Romano made his famous trip to New York and came back, and he says, never will little boys in short pants tell the people of Saskatchewan what to do, and he just took an axe to everything, closing hospitals and the like. The federal government did some accommodating measures. They gave them some upfront money to buy out the federal interest in New Grade, and maybe something like that will be in order, but we don't have a history of federal bailouts because, of course, we don't have a history of provinces going bankrupt.
Okay. You point to, in your report, public sector compensation costs, particularly in health and public administration, major contributors to higher than average spending when compared to other provinces. Can you give us an idea of how Newfoundland and Labrador compared to other provinces?
Yeah, so if we rewind the clock to the early 1990s, spending per capita in total in Newfoundland and Labrador was pretty much dead on the Canadian average. And then it comes back to that story that departed from the Canadian average when the offshore royalties started to come in. We cite health in particular because, of course, that's, as with every other province, that's the largest spending, but it was pretty much across the board. There was many years in the 2010s where their spending per capita was about 30% higher than the Canadian average, and it's come down a little bit more recently, but it's still very high. Now, there's one argument why it might be a bit on the high side, and of course, relative to other places in Canada, that they do have a very scattered population, and you can imagine it's very hard to run a healthcare system when you have a small number of people. You definitely have economies of scale, or in that case, you don't have economies of scale. But to get to that magnitude was really unsustainable right across the board. And while they don't have as scattered a population in other respects, the maritime provinces are relatively similar to Newfoundland and Labrador, but their spending is fairly close to the Canadian average. So when you look at all their economic parameters, that level of spending relative to other Canadian provinces is really the thing that stands out higher, in fact, than Alberta, even when Alberta did seem to have the economic might to finance it.
So what course of action should be taken, do you think, with, say, a goal in mind of having a balanced budget by 2025-26?
Unfortunately, I have to emphasize that the goal of a balanced budget in 2025-26 would just be an interim goal. That would still leave their debt ratio quite high, and it would still leave a lot of their revenue dollars going to pay on interest in the public debt. So they're going to have to get to that balanced budget and stay something like a balanced budget or even surpluses for quite a period after that. But to get to the balanced budget, they're going to have to knock a couple of $100 million off their level of spending. So in part, that will be natural because hopefully the pandemic settles down at some point and you can unwind the pandemic-related spendings. But above and beyond that, they're going to have to knock a couple of $100 million off. We're not talking about billions. I don't think it's an insurmountable task, but it's a difficult task. And it's one, if you look at successes, I mentioned Saskatchewan, if you look at the federal government in the mid-1990s, Ontario, there was a public constituency to support the move to restraint. That has to be there in order for this to come, and that takes a government to acknowledge the problem, put out a plan, build some support, and I'm not quite sure those conditions are in place right at the moment. I mean, we have an election where it doesn't seem to be much on anybody's radar.
This unsustainable track that you write about, how unique is Newfoundland and Labrador among the provinces in being on an unsustainable fiscal track?
Well, at the moment, they're certainly the worst. The turn for the worst was just as pronounced in Alberta, but of course it wasn't that long ago. Alberta had a net asset position, so they haven't sunk to that kind of debt. Other provinces are in dire shape. I mean, Ontario, for quite a while, been sort of a 30% net debt GDP ratio. They, like the federal government, have jumped over 50%. New Brunswick is probably not that far, and the fiscal challenges behind Newfoundland and Labrador. They don't have that same level of spending, but they have difficulties as well. And the common denominator, of course, in all of these places is with their older populations, their growth prospects aren't that high. Newfoundland and Labrador probably won't grow more than about 0.5% a year for quite a long time, given the structure of their population and what that means for a declining labor force. And of course, they have a net out-migration of skilled in education. They do have a pretty good education system, but a lot of those people leave. So, you got to work on both sides of it. They do need that fiscal restraint, but they do need to take actions to bolster their economic growth. And other provinces are not much better shape.
Okay. On that cheery note, thank you, Mr. Drummond.
Okay, you're
nice
welcome.
to hear from you. That is these days Professor Don Drummond, the Stauffer Dunning Fellow, Global Public Policy Professor at the School of Policy Studies, Queen's University. This is the Rob Snow Show, your political fix. After the news.
The Rob Snow Show.
Experience Winterlude across Canada. Watch the virtual show exploring Canada's winter traditions. Meet the carvers of Winterlude's first national ice carving competition. Vote online for your favorite sculpture. Celebrate Canada's artistic diversity with Fozia, Ariane Moffat, William Prince, Tracy Trash, Cornet, Ria May, and the incredible Eladj Balde. Join us February 5th at 7 p.m. This is Winterlude.
Number one for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Wednesday, February 3rd. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, -4 degrees. In Smiths Falls, -5. And here's what's making news this hour. If and when Health Canada approves AstraZeneca's COVID-19 vaccine, the country could get up to 1.1 million additional doses by the end of next month. These doses would come through the COVAX Global Vaccine Sharing Initiative. Now, half of the $440 million Canada contributed to COVAX back in September secured doses for Canada directly, with the balance of the fund going in to buy doses for people in 92 low and middle income countries. China's foreign ministry says officials are not convinced by this country's explanation of controversial T-shirts reportedly ordered last summer by someone at the Canadian Embassy in Beijing. Canadian officials say the T-shirts with an altered logo of the hip-hop group Wu-Tang Clan were not an insult linked to the coronavirus. Chinese critics, though, say the W is actually a bat, and the shirt is meant to imply a connection with the virus outbreak in Wuhan. Provincial police investigating incidents of large rocks placed on Highway 17. It happened earlier this month, and police say the traffic hazard was found in Whitewater Township. In fact, a couple of vehicles were damaged due to large rocks placed on the highway before 2 in the morning. This was back on Friday, January 8th. If you have any information about this, you're asked to call either the OPP or Crime Stoppers. City News Time, 9:33. I'm Andrew Boyle. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Strong voice.
Strong opinions.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's time to score your political fix. Andrew Brander's here, senior consultant at Crestview. Good morning, Andrew.
Good morning, Rob.
Karl Belanger is here. He's the president of Traxxion Strategies. Good morning, Karl.
Good morning.
All right, let's go through some of these polls. Leger. Liberals 37, Conservatives 28, NDP 22. Campaign Research 34, 30, 19. Ecos 34, 31, 15. Angus Reid 35, 30, 20. And Main Street 39 for the Liberals, 32 for the Conservatives, 14 for the New Democrats. Andrew Brander, with everything that's going on in the country right now, why are the Liberals in the lead?
Good question, Rob.
Yeah.
I
Isn't that a good question? Let's get right to the point. Why are they winning?
call it incumbent's advantage as we have never seen it before. It comes down to exposure. I think I was reflecting on this yesterday. Of course, it was Groundhog Day. But here we are a year later, and virtually every day, Canadians can turn on their TV at 11:30 and see the Prime Minister speaking outside his house, or at 2 o'clock and see the Premier speaking at Queen's Park, or at 5 o'clock and see, all of these premiers, all of these leadership figures from across the country speaking every day to Canadians. And I think that's why we have seen a majority of incumbent political leaders from across the country continue to enjoy, for lack of a better word, uncharacteristically high levels of support, and the Prime Minister is no exception to that. I think it's also why we've seen so many of them push to go to the polls, because they have effectively frozen out their opposition from the debate. Erin O'Toole has been exceptionally busy. Jagmeet Singh as well. Andrea Horvath, Stephen Del Duca have had virtual events and news conferences almost every day, but it's impossible for them to make headway when the news is covering so much of our political leadership.
Okay. Karl, why are the Liberals winning?
They're winning because a lot of what Andrew said is absolutely true. In a time of crisis, usually you want stability, you want your leadership to remain in place and to lead you through the crisis. There are some exceptions. We've seen one south of the border just recently where the man was so tone deaf that there was a big momentum to get rid of him. But in Canada, so far, every election has seen the government, provincial government, return, usually with an increased majority of seats. Now, there is no question that there are some more fundamental issues at play here. And when the Conservative Party replaced Andrew Scheer thinking he was the problem, well, perhaps he was not. Perhaps it's broader than that, and I think Erin O'Toole has started to address some of the issues when it comes to dealing with the more extreme wing of his party, guys like Derek Sloan. There are others that are totally unappealing to Canadians or to the mainstream Canadians, or to, more importantly, the famous liberal blue switch voter. Who has no interest in switching blue as long as the Conservative Party is seen or can be portrayed as a haven for extremists.
Portrayed being a key word there, I think, Karl, because perception so often is reality, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Let's focus a little bit, Andrew, for a moment here on the Conservative number here. Of those 5 polls that I mentioned, the highest number the Liberals scored was in the iPolitics Main Street poll, 32 points, as low as 28, which is you're breaking through the base there when you're hitting 28. That's the Leger Canadian Press number. We talked a little bit about this last week during the Political Fix. What's going on with Erin O'Toole's Conservatives right now?
Yeah, I would say that the polls are certainly something that has occupied a lot of the Conservatives' attention right now. What I look at in these polls and see as encouraging is the accessible number.
Okay.
And that seems to be, while inconsistent, going in the right direction generally. I do think to my earlier point that this has to do with exposure, and the more, to Karl's point, I'll agree with him. The more that people are willing to see this reshift in direction and focus of the Conservative Party, the larger that accessible number will grow. And I do think that what the Conservatives really are watching in these numbers very much are actually the NDP numbers. Because if the Conservatives can position this in the right way, that leads to the appropriate split. Of course, that was the way we saw, Stephen Harper win a majority government in previous iterations, right, of the Parliament.
Okay. Right now, Karl, where would you say the Liberals are most vulnerable, or the Prime Minister is most vulnerable? Is it vaccines right now, more than anything?
Yeah, it is vaccines, and it is, of course, the death toll, the number of people who get contaminated but also die from this. Now, what's saving him on that front is that a lot of people seems to make a differentiation between the federal responsibility and the provincial responsibility. And while I think Canadians know that the federal government is responsible for the current lack of supplies in Canada, they also believe that the provincial governments and the healthcare system is under their jurisdiction, and the fact that, especially in Quebec and Ontario, but other places, Alberta notably, that's on the provincial government. So the blame is shared. But when it comes to the vaccine rollout, you see the vulnerability in the kind of announcement that we saw yesterday from the Prime Minister, which was fully, completely, totally spin. We are going to produce vaccine in Quebec by the end of the summer. That was wrong. Minister Champagne had to correct the Prime Minister a few hours later to say, well, it might be before the end of the year. And frankly, I'm not sure which year we're talking about, because the reality is that we don't really have domestic production capability. But this was spent. This was just to distract us from the fact that Canada has fallen from the top 10 in the world with its percentage of population being vaccinated, and we're now in the 29th position and falling. That's a key vulnerability. And that's why you saw that announcement yesterday. They're trying to prevent that from damaging more.
Get something else in the news cycle. Get another narrative out there, right? Yeah. Oh yeah,
absolutely.
For sure. Yeah. Do you agree with that, Andrew?
Yeah, and I think that's why we saw, stories of the Governor General coming out, or those types of stories to try and distract from where they are most vulnerable. And you look at any challenge like this, and in truth, it does leave the government very exposed. There are all kinds of issues like this that can generate stories where there's new information every day. There's a new angle every day, and these can creep up on a government, and it's a slow build, but it, like a snowball, it becomes quite large very quickly. Just this morning, story broke about the EU further limiting exports. The Globe and Mail used their front page and full editorial section today to call, on the Prime Minister's domestic vaccine plan.
It's a heck of a front page. It's a heck of a front page for the Globe and Mail this morning, which is historically pretty friendly to the Liberals. I don't know if you can say that lately, but fairly large font above the fold here in the print edition. The country's early vaccination rollout is collapsing. Justin Trudeau's announcement about possible domestic production, the announcement he made yesterday, in some very distant future, is nothing but a distraction. Read our editorial, page 812.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right. And you know what? I got to say, I have some sympathy for these guys because these are the kinds of issues that, as a political staffer, I would have nightmares about, because really there isn't much that can be done at this point. The contracts are signed, the deals are done. You think back to that feeling you got in grade 9 when you've written that history test and you failed, you've handed it in. But you just have to wait until you get it back to know how bad you did.
Well, for me, it was more math and science. But okay.
That's right. But I mean, to that little analogy, you can spend all the time you want pre-positioning it with with your parents, and maybe you pull out a D-, but ultimately, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if other kids are getting a B+. And right now, there's a lot of other kids or a lot of other countries doing a heck of a better job than we are.
Let me ask you this, Karl. Given the situation with vaccines and the state of affairs right now with vaccines, the news seems to be deteriorating for the Trudeau Liberals on a daily basis here. Is the good money still on a spring election?
I think it can still happen. The Prime Minister sees that it will get worse until it gets better, and the getting better part is a big question mark when it comes down to the economic recovery. So the window is there. The opposition right now is nowhere to be seen. They don't have traction. I mean, the NDP has a bit of a bump, but that doesn't seem to be hurting the Liberals right now. And the Bloc Québécois is kind of, has hit a ceiling, so the Liberals could return with another huge number of seats from Quebec. So if you look at the polls and the trends, I mean, they probably could have gone this fall and won a majority, and they probably can go this spring and have a majority. And will that last? That's the question that the political strategists in the Liberal headquarters are asking themselves. Can that last when you know that the vaccination rollout is not going to improve for a few more weeks, if not months, that the economic recovery is going to struggle because it relies on people being vaccinated to be able to go out and return to a normal life. So where is that window closing for them? And that's the question that they have to ponder right now.
Okay, look, we'll stop here. When we come back, we will talk about that little NDP bump at 22% according to this latest poll. And Ches Crosby is the PC leader in Newfoundland. He has released it's a really funny. It's charming, I think, is what I would call it. Campaign ad, and I'd like your take on it. If you think it's an effective political ad, and if so, what makes it effective? 9:46, Rob Snow Show, your political fix on City News.
Well, we're celebrating our 43rd year. It's still family operated. We're in our second generation. We, pre-COVID, we're at about 1,000 employees. We have 20 stores from coast to coast in Canada. We do our own manufacturing. Right here in Ottawa, we have about 160 people that support Canadian-made manufacturing in addition to our retail stores. Taking you back to mid-March and the impact of the pandemic on Lee Valley. Lee Valley was actually in a tough spot. We had just launched our website a few months prior to that, and we were going through, a fairly typical deployment dive where your customers retract as they adjust to the website. And then under stress already, this pandemic hit. And in the early days, it was pretty critical. It hit us really hard. Stores were closed. We weren't sure what to do, so we had to go right into survival mode. As a result, we had to take our workforce almost back to half of where we were at because the stores were closed, and with 20 stores, that's a big retail workforce. But what we were able to do pretty quickly, with a little luck, being essential, selling tools and hardware, we were able to adjust our business model, with respect to the stores and our fulfillment operation. That new website that we were under stress worked out well for us because as the world was under house arrest, people were looking to online. And the conversion to our online sales in some cases almost doubled. And we saw tremendous interest in things to do at home. Where we were lucky once again and fortunate is that our product offering. Work at home tools, craft, hobbies, backyard, container gardening, you name it. What we sold was really appealing to people. With respect to our stores, Lee Valley, a rare unknown fact was that we were one of the pioneers of curbside pickup. We've been doing it for 25 years. Pretty much dove right into the application to help with the contactless shopping right away. We took the application, and it's not like a Apple application where you have to download it to your phone and clutter up your phone. This is literally resides right on our website. So you walk into our store with your phone, you pull up our website, and there's a little scan icon. You just tap that, select your store, off you go. You go through the showroom, you scan product, you can read more about it, you can check the on hand, you can add it to your cart, continue to shop, and when you're ready, you just submit it to the counter. We'll go pick it for you. We'll call out your name, we'll check you out, send you on your way. You haven't touched anything. It's completely safe, and it's using a device you're comfortable with and a website that you're familiar with. Amazingly, 9 out of 10 people that used it loved it and want to use it again.
The world is changing.
So keep up with Rob.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Part 2 of your political fix. So look, 22% in the polls for the NDP, but that's not the only thing going on with the NDP. The party has turned the corner financially, campaign debt paid off, money in the bank, strong fundraising numbers. But how does a stronger NDP, Karl Belanger is with us, Traxxion Strategies, along with Andrew Brander, senior consultant at Crestview Strategies. Karl, how does a stronger NDP impact a federal campaign, do you think?
Well, the prevalent narrative, and you've heard Andrew mention that earlier, is that a strong NDP should help the Conservative and should help them form a government. I mean, that's a myth that's been going around for years. But in fact, when you look at the NDP's top 4 results in history since the creation of the party in 1961, the party has achieved 19% or more 4 times, and 2 of those times you got 2 Conservative majority governments, in 88 under Broadbent and 2011 with Layton. And the NDP did well in 1980 and 2015 with Mulcair and again Ed Broadbent, and you got 2 Liberal majority governments. So there's no direct correlation between those results, right? The NDP right now in this poll, in this Léger poll, is actually closer to the Conservatives than the Conservatives are to the Liberals. It shows that voters don't move in a linear pattern the way we sometimes like to think they'll move from the Conservatives to Liberals and the Liberals to the NDP and vice versa. And that's why there's a brand of voters out there that do not like the Liberals and will switch from blue to orange, namely in Western provinces. And you see the NDP bumping up right now, especially in the 3 Prairie provinces and in British Columbia. And that's often at the expense of the Conservative Party. And that's the problem for them, because the NDP is actually helping the Liberals squeeze by in some of these seats by taking away some of the anti-Liberal votes. And in Alberta, it could be a big problem. The projection under the Léger poll shows up to 8 seats going to the Liberals because of the NDP rise in those ridings.
Wow.
So it shows that, first of all, the pitch that Erin O'Toole was making to the blue-collar workers, to the unionized crowd early in his tenure as leader, was not out of nowhere. There are voters out there that do not want to vote Liberals, are looking for an alternative, and right now they're moving between the blue and the orange.
Moving between blue and orange. Isn't that interesting? Is that how you see it, Andrew?
Yeah, I mean, in large part, I agree with what Karl was saying. The areas of growth certainly look for a lot of potential for the NDP to pick up some seats out west, especially around the areas that Karl mentioned, but also sort of in and around Vancouver. I wonder what their threshold is. We talk about 8 seats. Is that enough for the NDP to force an election given the current standings in Parliament? Yeah, I think it probably is. And I think that the NDP knows that they are in a very strong position to be able to point to some real results that they've been able to maneuver over the last year, where the other opposition parties might have a bit of a tougher time being able to delineate what those wins are. So I think the NDP is looking at this, seeing a lot of opportunity, and to Karl's point in terms of where the Conservatives are looking to grow, that's certainly a path open for Erin O'Toole.
Okay, let's play this election ad. There's an election campaign underway right now in Newfoundland and Labrador. Ches Crosby is the progressive conservative leader. And he released this ad, social media ad. I think it's cute. I actually quite like it. You picture it. It's him in his house. He's talking constantly about politics, and his daughters are in the house. Roll the tape.
I'm glad you asked me about equalization at supper, because it's a topic of tremendous importance.
My dad, Chess, is obsessed with solving problems.
And Quebec gets $13 billion a year, and we get squat.
He's always like this. My dad, Chess, is always trying to make things better.
Rachel, I shoot the moose, but your mother doesn't let me make the stew. Don't you think that's funny? But anyway, as we were saying before during dinner, this tax incentive program, by lowering the half-cent tax, negotiating with Ottawa is like a game of poker. In the words of Kenny Rogers, you got to know when to hold them, you got to know when to fold them, and you got to know when to walk away. 3 aces.
I thought we were playing Go Fish.
Not when the stakes are this high. A lot of people forget what the importance of the Atlantic Accord is to the prosperity of Newfoundland and Labrador.
Yeah, Dad.
And, you know, a lot of people at the doors are wondering why we're having an election during COVID. And furthermore, I have to question why the vaccine rollout is taking so long. And I also have to wonder why it is the government won't do point-of-entry testing, which would add another layer of protection for people in this province. By the way, Rachel, I really like hanging out with you. We should do this all the time. Oh, why the government?
Please elect my dad.
Come on, we got lots to talk about.
Please.
Please elect my dad. Please, please.
Please.
Oh, it's hilarious. Chess Crosby, Progressive Conservative leader. Andrew, what makes that an effective ad, do you think? A lot of people like that.
It's the little bit of cheese, right? Like it's distinct. It stands out, and it's effective. We're here in Ontario, speaking about the PC leader in Newfoundland, who, by every poll, is about to be handed a massive defeat. So in terms of what makes it effective, people are talking about it. It's on brand. He has a reputation for being a bit of a policy wonk. And you know what? It's memorable. I love the inclusion of family. I think it stays with people.
Yeah.
After it, the one thing I would sort of say, you know, strategically is not necessarily the best idea. Is the fact that, you know, the entire ad is about him asking questions, which of course is typically the role of the opposition leader. So, you know, if that's what he's campaigning to be, then great. But
okay.
Otherwise, you know what, an effective ad, I think it gives people a taste of who he is.
It's not negative. He never mentions the Liberals. He never mentions his opponent at all, which is curious. So, what do you think of that ad, Karl?
Well, I thought it was well done. I laughed. You know, I think it's a fun ad, but is it an effective ad, to your question?
Yeah, okay.
An effective ad is an ad that makes voters switch from another party to your party. Will that happen in this case? I don't know. Even if it does it matter? The last Main Street research poll, the Liberals at 62%, the Conservatives at 26%, and the NDP 9%.
Okay.
Does it matter? I mean, the election result in 2019, it was basically a tie, 43.9 to 42.6.
Yeah.
Everything shifted in the spring of 2020. What happened? Of course, the pandemic, and the Liberals shot up at the time to 60%, and the other two parties collapsed. And Chess Crosby has not been able, just like Erin O'Toole, just like other opposition parties out there, to put a dent in the governing party. And so he's releasing this ad now. Will it work? No, it won't work, and that's too bad, because I think it's a funny ad, but that's not the kind of ad that will make voters think, oh yeah, I should really vote for him this time to oust the Liberals.
Okay. Great conversation, as always. Thank you so much for this week.
Pleasure, Rob.
Both of you, yeah. Karl Belanger is the president of Traxxion Strategies, and Andrew Brander is a senior consultant at Crestview. The Talkback Hour is all yours. Coming right up on the Rob Snow Show on City News.
WW 1310 AM in Ottawa.
And CJET 1011 FM in Smiths Falls and the Valley. Number one for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 1011 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Wednesday, February 3rd. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, -4 degrees. In Smiths Falls, it's -5. And here's what's making news this hour. Ontario will announce today whether schools in regions hardest hit by COVID-19 can reopen next week for in-person learning. That decision will follow the recommendation from the Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. David Williams. Now, Education Minister Stephen Lecce says parents need to know if schools are going to reopen for in-person learning so they have time to prepare. The province had previously said schools in 5 COVID-19 hotspots, as well as several other regions, would reopen for in-person learning by February 10th. All students in Ontario began January with online learning as part of the provincial lockdown. We're getting the latest numbers from the health department in the province today. 1,172 new cases of COVID-19 today. From that number, 58 of these are in Ottawa. There are also 14 in Eastern Ontario's health unit, 4 for Leeds, Grenville, Lanark, and there are no new cases again today in Renfrew County. City News Time, 10:02, and now the forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
Cloudy, continuing windy. The wind out of the north-northwest to about 30 kilometers per hour. Some higher gusts as well. High near -1, feel like -7. Tonight, mainly clear, -9. And tomorrow, lots of sunshine. High again about -1. That's the high today, -1.
And right now in Ottawa, -4 degrees. In Smiths Falls, it's -5. City News Time, 10:03. Canada's list of terrorist organizations could grow later today. The federal government preparing to make an announcement about violent extremism. More from City News Parliament Hill reporter Cormac McSweeney.
The federal government is holding a technical briefing today on ideologically motivated violent extremism, and it takes place just before a news conference with Public Safety Minister Bill Blair. It's widely expected Canada will add groups to its list of recognized terrorist organizations, and that may include the Proud Boys, a right-wing group that was wrapped up in the storming of Capitol Hill. Many members have been arrested and charged. In the wake of that attack, the minister said he was collecting evidence, adding a terror designation would give law enforcement more investigative tools and allow financial institutions to freeze their assets. But Phil Gursky with Borealis Threat and Risk Consulting, who helped develop the terror list when he was a government intelligence analyst, has told me this is largely a political move.
When's the last time a terrorist cared what the law said? So if the Proud Boys see that they're listed, do you think they care? Of course they don't care. In fact, it might be a badge of honor for them.
The House of Commons passed a unanimous motion last month calling on the government to designate the Proud Boys as a terror group. Cormac McSweeney, Parliament Hill.
Schitt's Creek has landed a Golden Globe nomination in the category of Best TV Musical or Comedy Series. The show swept the Emmy Awards, you might remember last fall, winning 7 trophies. Schitt's Creek has some stiff competition, though, in the Golden Globe category, up against Emily in Paris, The Flight Attendant, The Great, and Ted Lasso. And sometimes you really shouldn't draw attention to yourself. Take a man in Guelph, for example, when recently asked to leave a donut shop after ordering. He refused and police were called. The man took off his mask and was eating the baked treat as police arrived. Now, police allege they found the man also with stolen clothing, grocery items, and other people's documents and credit cards. 33-year-old man now facing a total of 12 charges, including possession of ID documents and stolen credit cards. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
It's time to talk back
on the Rob Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
It's your hour. Love to hear from you between 10 and 11 o'clock. That's 750-1310, 750-1310, 613-750-1310. The Rob Snow Show at ottawa.citynews.ca. The news yesterday that a plant will eventually open in Montreal. A made-in-Canada COVID-19 vaccine facility will open in Montreal sometime in December of this year. How do you view that? Is that a good news story or a bad news story? Good news, bad news? Is it good news? Hey, there's going to be a made-in-Canada vaccine facility. It's going to be in Montreal. Or is it bad news because it's not going to be open until December, best case scenario, so many months from now, when it should have been done so many months ago, but instead the government had other ideas. Let's play some 750-1310, 750-1310. So how do you view that? Let's play some highlights from this Trudeau thing yesterday, the Rideau Cottage announcement, of course. Mr. Trudeau, one of the reporters asks, Mr. Trudeau, when will vaccines come out of that facility in Montreal?
In regards to specific timelines, I think the ministers who are up after me will be able to speak more to it, but my understanding is the production facility should be completed this summer, and once certification is made, we should then be able to start producing the vaccines here in Canada reasonably quickly after that, but for better timelines, you can ask the ministers.
So ask the ministers. So then an hour later, they ask one of the ministers, LeBlanc. And he says, yeah, it's not going to be the summer. It's going to be like December sometime, okay? December. December is not summer, okay? Okay, maybe in Australia it is, but okay. Now, David picked up on this. I didn't hear this. Trudeau said yesterday, Prime Minister Trudeau said yesterday, everyone who needs to be vaccinated will be vaccinated by September. We hope everybody who needs, not wants, which is different, but everyone who needs to be vaccinated. Listen to what David is cueing in on here.
We're able to confidently say that not only will we get 3 million Canadians vaccinated by the end of March, we will have everyone who needs to be vaccinated by September.
Let's play the last half of that again.
We will have everyone who needs to be vaccinated by September.
Everyone who needs to be vaccinated will be vaccinated by September. Now, maybe we're reading too much into things here, but one more time.
By the end of March, we will have everyone who needs to be vaccinated by September.
Everyone who needs to be. Well, what do you mean by needs to be? I would like to think I need to be vaccinated. I'd like to get vaccinated. David would like to get vaccinated, but David's 23. Does he really need to be vaccinated? David can wait probably another 2-3 years before he needs to be vaccinated. 750-1310, 750-1310. I thought this was a tough question. This is Gallagher. Kevin Gallagher is with CTV News, the national news here in Ottawa. Picking up on the front page story yesterday in the Globe and Mail, how the UK is so far ahead of us, whether it's in getting shots into arms, domestic production of vaccines, all of it. The UK is just so far ahead of Canada. Why could they do that in the UK under a Conservative government? Why could they do that in the UK, Mr. Prime Minister, but you can't do it here?
There are countries around the world that work extremely hard to develop their scientific capacities, to expand their manufacturing. I'm very pleased. I was very pleased last September to announce investments in the Royal Mount facility that's going to lead us to having vaccine production capacity as of this coming summer. There's always more that we can do, but there's always going to be ways to draw on lessons learned and inspiration from other countries. Although I will highlight that in terms of models, we recognize that.
So that was yesterday's episode of the Justin Trudeau Show, broadcast live on your favorite cable news outlet. Was that supposed to be reassuring? Were you reassured? I'll be honest with you, I'm not feeling assured or reassured. All of these hours later, even after sleeping on it, about domestic productions of vaccines. I get it. It's supposed to be a good news story, but I can't get myself across that finish line, ladies and gentlemen. I need your help. Is it a good news story? Is it a bad news story? 750-1310. Okay? We're going to make them here. We have the technology. And I have gathered, I have gathered you all here today to tell you the good news. We're going to have made in Canada vaccines. You just have to wait 10 months. Best case scenario. If everything goes according to plan. And, plans, right? The best laid plans. When does anything these days go according to plan? See, I've come to the conclusion, as has let's see here. I mean, there's not much. He's not getting an easy ride in the media today with this, the Globe editorial calling it nothing but a distraction. The Sun goes with vax and fiction. I think it was damage control yesterday. I think it was spin class yesterday. Next, Prime Minister Trudeau should do these Rideau Cottage things. He should do them on a Peloton. Joe Biden has a Peloton. Like, why doesn't the Prime Minister have it? He should do the Rideau Cottage thing on a Peloton.
You can ask the ministers.
He had really nothing new to report. But you see, the news cycle's not working in his favor right now, and he's desperate to pull the plug. He wants to call an election. He had been hoping that his vaccination program would be going a lot better. That's kind of messing with his election timetable, I think. So he wanted to get another narrative out there in the news media, right? I don't think they were having much of it yesterday when it came to this announcement about this government-owned facility in Montreal. I mean, if you're going to make an announcement, it's your announcement, right? At least have the timeline straight. Be ready to answer some very basic questions. Stop it with the word salad. I'm getting a little fed up with the word salad. It's like a trip to Panera Bread with this guy sometimes. When will the vaccines roll out of this facility in Montreal, Mr. Prime Minister? Ask my ministers.
You can ask the ministers.
Go ask my ministers. They know better than me. I'm just the Prime Minister. And then Minister LeBlanc admits the Prime Minister's timeline's not quite accurate. There won't be vaccines coming into that building in Montreal in the summer. Think more like winter and snow tires and Christmas shopping, if you're allowed, and sleigh bells and Santa Claus and chestnuts roasting on an open fire. That's when you might get some vaccines, okay? Maybe then there will be vaccines coming out of that factory in Montreal. It's the kind of performance that nevertheless has his party with this inexplicable lead in the public opinion polls. We will have a made in Canada vaccine by summer, and by summer, we really mean Christmas. If everything goes according to plan. Some things, they're not going according to plan, and the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Is this a good news story? Is it a bad news story? How do you see it? At 750-1310, it is our talkback hour. Robert in Ottawa. Good morning. You're on City News.
Good morning, Rob.
How do you see it? Is it good news? Is it bad news? What is it, this thing?
It's just, you know what? I'm going to split the difference and call it the same old news.
Same old news. It's old news. Okay.
You've got this company out in Calgary, Providence, that's going to develop this. They were looking for money back, a bunch of months ago.
May of last year.
Yeah, and the government, Trudeau, they weren't interested in giving them the money. They should have given them the money. They could have developed it. They could have been producing it right now, quite possibly.
Yep.
Like, perfect example, look down in the States. Biden has kicked everything into high gear. But the thing is, the question I have, and I don't understand about Trudeau, is that he believes his own lies. He believes his own stuff. It's kind of like Wynne in Ontario. She was believing everything that was coming out of her mouth as if it was gospel. But the problem is that why are they building this thing in Montreal? Why don't they build it out in Calgary next to where this company is developing the vaccine? Why do they have to build it in Montreal? That's my question.
Well, and I'm going to play a clip of Justin Ling, the journalist who's written about this in the Globe and Mail, along with Marika Walsh. She was on with my colleague Mark Sutcliffe yesterday here on City News. We'll play it when we come back. Right where this facility is, Robert, for the National Research Council in Montreal, right next door.
Yeah.
There's a private company there called Nuvax. It's right next door. It's on the same darn street, for crying out loud.
Oh, yeah.
They make vaccines right there.
Yeah.
They're like, hey, government, you need us to make vaccines. We can make vaccines for you. They were totally ignored. Instead, they break ground on a brand new building.
Exactly. And
right next door.
It's what boggles my mind is that we're in debt up to our eyeballs. And this guy is still pulling the whole selfie image thing. Look at me. And what Justin Trudeau doesn't understand is that, he'll probably get reelected because the majority of Canadians are stupid and they're lazy. And they're just going to vote for the same person over and over and over again. But the simple fact of the matter is he doesn't seem to understand one thing. He's into image, and he looks like an idiot in the eyes of everybody else.
Well, there's certainly something to the obsession with style and image. I don't think the majority, I will disagree with you. I don't think the majority of Canadians are stupid and lazy. And if the Liberals win an election, they'll probably win with 38% of the vote, which is not the majority of Canadians. And I disagree with you. We're hardworking, industrious, and we're innovative. And I don't accept that most of us are stupid and lazy. No, I do not. Never will. 10:17, Talk Back Hour, Rob Snow Show on City News.
When you've lost your breasts, you've sort of lost part of yourself. And then all at once, you're losing your hair. You don't know who you are anymore. You want to feel like yourself again. So I think that the store, a mastectomy store, is essential because you've lost your identity. And then all at once, you're looking for a wig, you need a headscarf, you need a camisole. There's nowhere to go. There's no one to talk to. This should be essential because there are more and more women that are getting breast cancer. I think it's 1 in 6. They're becoming younger. I have a client that's 18 years old. And where do they go? They need a place like this that the women that work there understand. They know what you're going through. It's changed quite a bit. Our hours are different. We're now open from 10 to 5. We're not as busy as we were. A lot of women are afraid to go out. They're afraid that maybe there are more people in the store. So that's why I try and let them know you are alone. There's absolutely nobody in the store except you and I. If there is a woman that she's very afraid, I will lock the door to make sure nobody else comes in. I'll put a sign back in 10-15 minutes just to give her that reassurance. Before we would have 4, 5, 6 people in the store. We didn't have to turn anybody away. Now we do. Some clients do leave and they're upset because they're in the store. They said, we drove 20 minutes and now we're not allowed in the store. And I try to make them understand that there's somebody in here that's going through chemo or radiation. So that's sort of changed a lot, that we're not able to have more people in the store.
If we're talking about products, there's the bras that are adapted for mastectomy, the bathing suits that are adapted to mastectomy. We have special camisoles as well, and post-surgery bras. And then we have, for women going through chemo, the wigs that we have a big selection in the store as well. We have scarves. Some women don't feel comfortable wearing a wig. They prefer to wear a scarf or a hat, so we have a huge selection of that as well. We offer compression garments as well. When you're going through a mastectomy, you might have lymphedema in your arms after a couple of years, and you have flare-ups. So we have the sleeves, the hand as well that can be covered. We show each other's our scar. We talk about the treatments, how we felt, and I guess that's what they're looking for here. That's what makes us special. We have an added value in this store. Besides everything that's in the store, that's a product that can handle any problem that a client might have. Me and Linda, we've been through. We know how it feels in our bodies.
Hello. On the Rob Snow Show. The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
This facility is going to open, fingers crossed, by December, with Made in Canada coronavirus vaccine. How do you view that announcement? Is that a good news announcement, a bad news announcement? I don't want to spend too much time on this, but it's worth reminding everyone about some of the options that were out there and some of the decisions made by the people in charge of making the decision, like the new Vax facility in Montreal. And I was thinking, who knows a lot about that is Justin Ling. He wrote a lot about that along with Marika Walsh. They were sharing the byline in the Globe and Mail. The situation actually on the ground, in that neighborhood in Montreal. And I thought, hey, we should call Justin Ling, get him on the show. He probably really have a lot of insight. But then I remembered, wait, he's on the Power Lunch today with Mark Sutcliffe. And sure enough, right after we wrapped things up on the Rob Snow Show yesterday, Mark asked Justin Ling about this announcement by Mr. Trudeau at Rideau Cottage yesterday about the National Research Council, and this was Justin Ling yesterday on City News Ottawa.
So I think the Prime Minister is right now announcing exactly this. It's not going to make a difference. This is some top level, top shelf effort to sort of put a happy face on what has been a boondoggle. So just to recap for everybody, at the beginning of the pandemic, the government decided it was going to partner with CanSino, the Chinese company that was supposed to produce vaccines, with our help and do clinical trials with our help here in Canada. Everything was going to be run out of the National Research Council facility in Montreal. Obviously, before it even got off the ground, that deal fell apart. So not long thereafter, Ottawa tried to figure out what they could use the National Research Council facility for. They decided that they were going to start retooling it to make somebody else's vaccine. They then quickly realized that the facility, wasn't actually well suited for this at all. So they decided they were going to build a whole new building to produce vaccines. So they broke ground in the summer with a huge investment from Ottawa in the hundreds of millions of dollars range, with a big announcement from the Prime Minister that by 2021 we'd be producing 2 million doses of vaccine per day. Everybody who outside of government who's familiar with this told them, this is not going to work. You are not going to have this facility online as fast as you think you are. You don't even have a partner to produce a vaccine with. What are you doing? Now, the government is making this big announcement as though it's a wonderful development. This building is still months behind schedule. There is no guarantee of when it comes online. I've seen pictures of this facility in the last couple of months. There's still a giant tarp covering most of it. This facility will not be producing vaccines in any way, shape, or form earlier than the fall. We're supposed to have everyone in this country vaccinated by September. This facility will not make a meaningful difference. What's so frustrating about this is that maybe you would just say, well, this facility will be for the next pandemic, or we'll produce vaccines here that we can ship to the global south and make sure everyone else has vaccines. That's very admirable. But the problem that frustrates me is that right next door to this National Research Council facility in Montreal is a vaccine production facility, a different one, a private one that has volunteers volunteered to make vaccines, and the government of Canada have not taken them up on it. It is incredibly frustrating to watch this government make this mistake, because they already made this mistake around treatments and vaccines for Ebola. They already messed up the entire development process for the Ebola treatment, and now they're doing it again for COVID-19, and you have to wonder how many times can the government screw this up before they learn a lesson.
Justin Ling, who did some dynamite reporting on this for the Globe and Mail. I mean, can you say it better than he did? I don't know. Barry, Ottawa, do you think this facility in Montreal, is this a good news story or a bad news story? What do you think, Barry?
Well, I'm not reassured by it, Rob, because one question I have is, who's the general contractor doing the construction? Is it Lavalin?
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, follow the money.
Follow the money. Maybe it is Lavalin, whoever it is, whatever. It's not open yet. It won't be open until December, right? So
well, that's why they're spending so much money on it, Rob. It's just like you say, follow the money. The place right next door that could do it, and the government would rather spend the money and have more delay. I noticed on his speech yesterday that there was a lot of deflection from Trudeau, especially when he made the statement that he was blaming previous governments for all these delays and that we have no vaccine manufacturing here in Canada. Well, I don't think it was Harper that drove out the drug companies. I think it was Trudeau and his high taxes, from what I've heard. And I just, no, I don't.
Well, I mean, to the clip that we just heard, Barry, and I thank you for your call, we have a vaccine company right next to this one. Right next to this facility that's the whole point of the insanity of all of this. Let's build a brand new facility for COVID-19 right next to the facility where we can already make the doses for the COVID-19 vaccine. Yeah, people in government made that choice. The federal government, the Liberal government. Downtown James.
Morning, Rob.
Good news or bad news?
I mean, I was looking at the UK, what they did. They are about the same. They were about the same place as Canada. They were making vaccines like Canada was for the flu and MMR and stuff like that. And last spring, they went hard in investing in manufacturing. They're actually not just doing the Oxford vaccine. They're doing 3 different vaccines. Are being manufactured already in the UK, including the Novavax.
Yeah, I have some details on that. Yeah.
People read the UK COVID-19 vaccine delivery plan, which is a really well-written document. It describes everything they've done from a manufacturing perspective. Boris Johnson last spring was in the ICU with COVID, recovered, and kept on working on this stuff. Justin was breaking public health rules and taking the knee at BLM protests, right? We are so far behind what other G7 nations are able to do. We used to be able to do stuff like with Lord Beaverbrook and C.D. Howe and stuff like that during World War II. The other thing to note is that I was looking, there's a brand new document out today called the COVAX Interim Distribution Forecast. And it's all third world countries and Canada are going to be getting.
Yeah, it's interesting. I saw Canada could get 1 million doses under the COVAX agreement, right?
1.9 million. But if you look at the list of countries, I looked on the list. It's Cambodia.
I thought that was for developing countries.
Canada, Central African Republic, Chad, Chile. Now, one of the countries, a little bit, it's Korea. I don't know whether it's North or South Korea, but every other country there is a third world country. No one from the G7 or the Europe is on that list. We're listed between Cameroon and Central Africa Republic. Wow. This is a joke. Look at the look at the COVAX interim distribution forecast that came out today. This is just shameful. So, but I'm glad he took the knee for the BLM protest last June.
Okay, all right. Let's go. Yeah, you too, James. Yeah, you too. Back after this. It's halftime in the Talkback Hour. Rob Snow Show, City News.
local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Wednesday, February 3rd. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, -4, Smiths Falls -5, feeling colder in the wind. And here's what's making news this hour. Latest provincial COVID numbers are out. 1,172 new cases from over 52,400 tests completed. There were also 67 more deaths reported. After saying there could be fluctuations in Toronto numbers due to a change in their reporting this week, that city has 444 new cases. Locally, 58 new cases in Ottawa, 14 in the Eastern Ontario Health Unit, 4 for Leeds, Grenville, Lanark, and 0 in Renfrew. A technical briefing today from the federal government and a media briefing from the public safety minister are to come. Bill Blair expected to outline additions to Canada's list of recognized terrorist organizations. Now, this could include the Poor Boys, which is a right-wing group. It had some members arrested and charged as part of the storming of Capitol Hill earlier this month. Ottawa Police Service looking for your help trying to find a missing 74-year-old man. Brian Waters, last seen around 7:30 last night in the area of Carling and Edgeworth Avenue. He's described as 5'10" with a thin build, gray buzz-cut hair, and clean-shaven. He was last seen wearing dark pants, dark-colored jacket, and a blue surgical mask. City News Time, 10:32. I'm Andrew Boyle. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
It's time to talk back
on the Rob Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
This is leading to friction between our provincial governments and the federal government. General Rick Hillier, in charge of the vaccine rollout for the Ford government, had this to say yesterday about Canada's supply of vaccines.
With the Pfizer interruptions in supply, we've lost confidence in the supply chain. And that means, despite what the Premier said earlier, we were leaning forward and using some of the second doses to get to some of those residents in long-term care homes without making sure we had one for each person we had given the needle to already in our inventory. And so we got caught a little tiny bit. We won't be caught again for the immediate future until we rebuild that confidence in the Pfizer supply line.
Pfizer supply line. We've lost confidence in the supply chain. We've lost confidence in the supply chain. Another thing that Mr. Trudeau tried to offer assurances on yesterday was about the vaccine nationalism, the export control that are in effect, the export controls that are in effect in the EU. And this is what he had to say about that.
International affairs and agreements between nations are based an awful lot on firm commitments made in conversations and shared publicly. It's not like a small claims court where you can show a document. The conversations I had with the President of the European Commission were enough to reassure me and should be enough to reassure all Canadians.
So we're going to follow up on that angle of the story. Do you have a legal document that shows the EU can't block our vaccines that come from Belgium? Is there any kind of legal document that you can show us? And Mr. Trudeau says, well, it's based on relationships that we have with world leaders. It's it's not like small claims court. It's not like small claims court. But there have been a number of dumbfounding decisions here. Justin Ling, in the clip that we played for you before the news, mentioned the New Vax facility, which is right next door to this Royal Mount facility in Montreal, the brand new one that is still 10 months away from opening. You have the CanSino farce. I mean, of all the countries in the world to partner with on vaccine research, this government says, hey, let's partner with a company from China. What could possibly go wrong? That goes south in a hurry. Partnership lasts for 3 days. 3 days after it was announced at one of these Rideau Cottage, well, what do you call them? They're storytelling sessions. It's kind of like, when I was a kid, we used to watch The Friendly Giant on television. Now we all watch Trudeau. The candidate vaccine was blocked from leaving the Beijing airport, destined for Halifax, Nova Scotia. It was blocked at the Beijing airport. Couldn't get off the tarmac by government officials in China. And they kept up this charade that this partnership was still ongoing. They kept that up for 3 months. even though it was dead after 3 days. We know that there's a Glaxo plant that makes vaccines in Sainte-Foy, near Quebec City, vaccine production facility. Another one. Former CEO Glaxo blew the whistle on that in the papers. Makes most of Canada's flu vaccine every year. It was never under consideration. Like, where's the innovation minister? Oh, yeah, he's leaving politics. Good choice, buddy. Providence Therapeutics, right? Calgary company working on the same mRNA technology for years because of the promise that it shows as a therapy for some types of cancer. It applies for funding at the behest of the government. This government that loves to wrap itself up in all things science. Science, yeah, science. Go science, you rock science. Right? It takes 5 months to hear back about its application and 7 months to get $4.5 million in the bank. Moderna in the United States, under Operation Warp Speed, $1 billion in funding from the U.S. government. There were all sorts of other options worth exploring. And I'm going to get to your calls in just a second. Let's compare this, okay? What if companies like Providence or Nuvax, what if they were founded by the Kielburger brothers? I'm not kidding, okay? I'm not kidding. Stick with me here. You remember the Kielburger brothers, the weed charity? You think things would have turned out different? Think about how fast that whole thing came together. How the Kielburgers seemed to have this instant connection with anyone they wanted to talk to in the government. You want to talk to Bill Morneau? Here's Bill Morneau. You want to talk to somebody in the PMO? All you got to do is make a phone call, send an email, or send your person around to all the offices of cabinet ministers. They weren't even registered as lobbyists, for crying out loud. They score this massive win within weeks, massive win. Run $1 billion program for the government. And before it delivers anything, before it even delivers one volunteer, it got all of its money up front, $35 million. The Canadian government pumped $1 billion into the We charity. The U.S. government pumped $1 billion into Moderna. What would you rather have? Moderna vaccine or money for high schoolers to stick at home on their computer and make internet memes? Okay. The We Charity grant thing moved at lightning speed, didn't it? Warp speed, you could say. Here we are today, made in Canada vaccine production, still 10 months away. Under the rosiest scenario. And this is government actually wants to give itself a pat on the back? Like for a job, for what? A job well done? You want to do a victory lap? Spare me your grandiosity. Your vaccine rollout is an also-ran. You are House League. You know what? That's an insult to House League. You're actually Beer League. Bill in Nepean. It's a wonderful place to be in Nepean. Good morning, Bill.
Yeah, good morning. You know, Rob, as soon as I heard that they were building a building, when there are so many empty buildings in this country, the back of my hairs on the back of my head went up, and I said, there's something wrong. We could already be into this. What do you mean building a building? You know, there's something wrong. It smells like hell, for one. Secondly, the retrofit, even if you build a building, they got to retrofit it. So why not retrofit a building that's already up? There's, like I said, lots of empty ones. Secondly, how are they going to staff it? What are they going to do? These are scientists, specialist people. What are they going to do? Go steal them off of existing guys? They should have went to bed with a company. They could be there.
Yeah.
There's something wrong.
Right next door.
Somebody's got to look into this. There's something wrong there.
All right. Yep. Okay, Bill. Yep. Good stuff, Bill. Good. Yep. 750-1310. 750-1310. Second half of the Talkback Hour. Rob Snow Show. Paul, Ottawa.
Hi, Rob. How are you?
Sunshine, lollipops, and rainbows everywhere. How are you, Paul?
I'm doing.
Gosh, that cheers me up to hear that. Yeah. Go ahead.
I'm concerned about the poll that came out that showed the Liberals so far ahead. And it left me dumbfounded until I, reflected on one thing. During this whole pandemic, when we hear news about how we're doing in our response, our government's doing in response to the pandemic, we immediately turn around and compare ourselves to the U.S., probably one of the countries that handled it the worst. And I think that's one reason why Canadians are willing to accept this at best mediocre, but let's be honest, this failed response to the pandemic. I think the news outlets, and I guess in a way I'm sort of blaming you and the news, but I think it would have been better, more productive, is that we compared ourselves to other countries that are better suited to be compared to. And I think that's why Canadians are just accepting our response to the pandemic, because we just think, it's better than the U.S. But we're not looking at, other countries, Australia, New Zealand, Great Britain, whatever it may be, and certainly not gold standard like Taiwan and stuff. I think that helps explain the poll. What do you think?
Well, I think right now, when it came to the depths of the disease and the spread of the disease, the severity of the illness, the death toll, we were all ready to hold ourselves up as some kind of shining light, right? Look how much better we're doing than, say, our American friends. Well, right. now there's supposedly light at the end of the tunnel, right? Vaccines are here. Well, I'll tell you what, now is no time to be doing victory laps or claiming superiority over our American friends, because their vaccine program is proving to be far superior to ours.
Oh, absolutely. They're rolling it out quicker.
Oh, yeah.
My point is, I wanted to see more comparisons to, let's say, Australia. I understand that they're an island, and that gives them some advantages, but also gives them disadvantages. But throughout this pandemic, it's a great comparison, not just for pandemic reasons, but other reasons. Similar population, demographics, culture, industry, you name it. And, it's always compare ourselves to the States. No, you know what? Comparisons are useless unless if they're comparable, right? And that's where I think, I'm very frustrated. I think if we put more of a limelight on comparing ourselves to, like I said, more comparable countries, I think Canadians would be like, wait a second, why are we not doing as well? And versus just constantly defaulting to, the U.S. example. Okay. And like you said, the U.S. is even, beginning to outperform us as far as getting people vaccinated.
Well, look, we haven't even we've been doing vaccinations in this country since December 14th. Okay? We haven't even vaccinated 1 million people. Do you know how many doses they've given out in the United States?
Well, you look at Israel.
32 million.
Look at Israel. They're at 55% of the population has been vaccinated, at least on their first shot. And I know, smaller country, I get it, it's different, but is it that much of a difference that they have more than half of their population vaccinated? We got to really be slamming the heat on the fact that this Liberal government, this federal government, and maybe other governments too, because Stephen Harper showed some ties to it too, they're too cozy with China, to be honest with you. And we saw that. They went with the Chinese vaccine right from the start. And that's whacked, because I was really caught as a person. I was like, wait a second, I'm not an anti-vaxxer, but if that thing's coming from China, I'm going to have some serious questions about it. And that was a view that was well-founded. Brazil just found out that the vaccine that they were told was 92% effective provided by China. Well, turns out independent research, their own research, you name it, extensive research shows that it's maybe 51%. And that's this is what's going on up at the top, And
what's going on up at the top? Good question, Paul. I got to run. The final quarter's coming up. Thank you. Of the Talkback Hour, Rob Snow Show, City News.
No Nut Butter is a business where we make allergy-friendly spreads, so alternatives to peanut butter, Nutella, or those kind of things that kids and adults like to have on toast or on a banana or on an apple, and aren't really available to people with severe food allergies or allergies to the top allergens. When you're an allergy parent, you read every label because you need to know the details of every ingredient that's in the products that you're going to feed your kid. So we found that a lot of the products that we were looking at had may contain warnings, which we can't have, and had just so many ingredients in them that you don't know if there's a weird unknown ingredient that is kind of disguised under a different name. So we started No Nut Butter so that we would have the opportunity to have products that were safe and free from the top allergens and had really simple ingredients in them so that you would know exactly what you were feeding your kids. We make 4 different products at No Nut Butter. So we make a pumpkin seed butter, which is our alternative to peanut butter. So it only has pumpkin seeds, roasted pumpkin seeds, and some kind of oil in it. So we usually use corn oil or olive oil. And then we make what we call Choco Pumpkin, and it is our alternative to a chocolate hazelnut spread. So it is our pumpkin seed butter with our chocolate spread, so very much chocolate hazelnut spread. We make a coconut caramel, so it is coconut milk and sugar, and it is our kind of vegan option for caramel, because typically caramel has lots of butter and dairy in it. And then we make an apple butter, which is apples and cinnamon and sugar, and that's it. We do also make a sugar-free pumpkin seed butter option because we have some diabetics and just some people who don't want sugar in their lives, and so we do offer that, but you'd have to custom order it. There are very strict rules around producing products, particularly nut-free products. You aren't allowed to cook in your own kitchen, which makes a lot of sense. If you have a dog, you don't want to cook in your own kitchen. But from a nut standpoint, it's just making sure that you have everything really clean and organized. So we cook all of our products in a commercial kitchen so that we can keep all of those health and safety procedures really tight and together. My personal business started a company called Shop Local Ontario during the pandemic, so we were pretty well equipped to go forward into the pandemic in a world of e-commerce and transacting online. You can find us online at nonutbutter.com, or you can find us on Facebook, No Nut Butter, or on Instagram at No Nut Butter.
Talk back.
Hello. On the Rob Snow Show. The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
Part of my daily routine is to go through our world in data, which is compiled by researchers at Oxford University, and how we measure up today compared to some of our so-called peer countries. The key number for today, I think, would be 2.6. Canada's number today, same as it was yesterday. Vaccine doses administered per 100 people in the population, 2.6. Israel's number today is 57.6. United Arab Emirates, 34.8. UK, 14.4. Bahrain, 10.2. United States, 9.6. Italy, 3.4. Germany, 3.0. France had been a gong show. It's getting up there, 2.3. Whole bunch of other countries you would think we'd be doing, at least competing with. We're not really competing with. Serbia, 6.3. Iceland, 4.5. Romania, 3.8. Slovenia, 3.7. You get the idea. And then just in total cases, just the raw number, we haven't even hit 1 million in Canada. 974,690 as of yesterday. We've been vaccinating people for 6 weeks. Haven't even hit 1 million doses. We'd have to get to 32 million to give every Canadian under the age of 15 at least one dose. That's how many doses have been administered now in the United States. 32 million. They've vaccinated more than 32 million people. The United States has already administered more doses of vaccine than the entire population of Canada. The UK is closing in on 10 million, Israel 5 million, Germany 2.4 million. Poland, 1.2 million. In fact, you know what? We have the worst performance in total doses administered, worst number of all the G7 countries. Worst number of all the G7 countries. You going to put that on your campaign sign? Hey, we're the worst of the G7. Elect us. 8 American states, U.S. states, have administered more vaccine doses than all of Canada. California, Texas, Florida, New York, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Michigan, and Ohio. And soon, North Carolina will pass us as well. North Carolina, population 10 million people. It's administered almost as many doses as Canada has. How do you look at that number and say, hey, we're doing great. Let's have an election. Canadians will reward us. We've done such a good job. Michelle, Ottawa South. Good morning.
God love you, Rob. Because I'm.
You know what?
Tired.
God love me.
Yeah, I'm getting tired of paying attention. I can't imagine what it would be like to have to do it day in and day out. I'm glad you're there. Thank you. Well, in the middle of the night last night, I couldn't sleep, so I turned on the TV and I start scrolling through, and PBS is about to run a program called Frontline. I said, well, that's interesting. What's it about? So it was about the World Health Organization. They had leaked recordings in the early days about their mishandling of the COVID crisis along with China. So, so we're not surprised. We know all of this stuff. It wasn't handled right. But what really surprised me is that PBS, American Public TV, funded by the public, the ad opening up the program was from the government of Canada, advertising Winterlude.
Oh,
so
okay.
I couldn't believe it. I've been a member of PBS for years, and I'm thinking now my Canadian tax dollars are paying. Not only that, I see it and make the connection. Do you think the Chinese missed it? I mean, come on. So on Sunday night, I'm watching 60 Minutes, not a month into the Biden presidency, and they're 60 Minutes is telling us that China is harvesting our DNA data so they can predict our future illnesses and be able to prescribe us our medicines that we'll need for life. Oh my God, isn't that frightening, right? And we can't even look after our population right now with the meds they need. Wake up and become protectionists yourself and prepare for the future. Build your own pharmaceutical industry and be reliant on yourself to protect your population. And stop giving money to American TV when you have CBC. Make these programs, produce them in Canada, make them by Canadians. And Mr. Trudeau, if you're not reading the paper, maybe you should start watching TV. What I've learned in the past year is that globalism sucks, borders matter, make your own meds, it's important, and Trudeau's not nice to women. And oh yeah, don't forget, I'm supposed to clap for Bob Ray because he said Orwellian yesterday, take that, China. Well, maybe if CBC was actually making interesting programs and compiled all the failings of the Trudeau government, this guy would be gone bye-bye. That's all I have to say.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Okay. I think people are in the mood to get stuff off their chest. You know what? That can be therapeutic. So go for it. Eric. Good morning, Eric.
Good morning, Rob.
Yes, sir.
I think we may have dodged a bullet with Nuvax.
Nuvax. Okay. All right.
The place just
place next door. Yeah, the place next door. Yeah.
So, I mean, it's been involved in producing pneumococcal vaccine for a good number of years. It did a major overhaul of its facility in, I think it was 2012, 2013. But it's received about $30 million from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. But there was something in there that caused Bill and Melinda to scratch their heads and take a second look, and they ended up suing them.
Oh, okay.
For one reason or another.
Okay.
Not sure what it is, or I know it was resolved. Nuvax probably can do it. They can get into some fermentation. I don't know what the capacity is there, but it's a father and son owned company. They've had some financial difficulties in the past. I think we may have just dodged a bullet on this one.
Okay.
So,
what do you think about this December timeline
for the Montreal facility?
For the Montreal facility, then.
Well,
because
as I pointed out yesterday, I don't think that the building will be constructed much before the end of the summer or early fall. That's the shell. And then you've got all of the infrastructure that has to go into that building, all the plumbing, all the electrical, all the fermentation capacity, all the finish and fill capacity. You've got to develop procedures for almost everything that touches that vaccine, and you've got to validate all those procedures. That is not a time. It's time consuming. It's filthy expensive, and once you've got your processes validated, then you have to validate your process for producing that vaccine. So I don't believe we're going to see anything coming out of that Montreal facility much before 2022, 2023 at the earliest.
Okay. All right, Eric. Thank you.
Talk to some people that know that are versed in good manufacturing practices. I think you're going to get the same story from them.
Okay.
There's not a hope in hell of any time this year or any time next year, as far as I'm concerned, that you're going to get an injectable product out of that plant.
Oh, okay. All right, Eric. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. I like picking that guy's brain. Tim, Ottawa. Tim.
Hi, Rob. Two quick points.
Yeah.
You listed off pretty interesting stats about where we are in production and the vaccination rate throughout the world. There's only one problem with them.
What's that?
Why isn't Mr. O'Toole having a press conference every day saying this? Where is Mr. O'Toole?
Okay.
Can anyone find him? Is he even in the country?
Yeah, he's in the country.
I can never understand why people run for a job, get the job, and then run away from the job. If you don't have the stones to go after Trudeau and his corrupt government, then resign, and possibly somebody out there will. Last night I saw on the news the Glengarry Games for 2021, the last weekend in August, have been canceled.
Canceled, yeah.
Let me tell you what else has been canceled, yet they haven't released it yet. Blues Fest, Tulip Fest, all the Little Valley County fairs. All of that for 2021 has been canceled 2 years in a row. And you're telling me everyone in Canada is okay with this? What has this country become?
Yeah. I don't think people are okay with
no,
this.
Well, we are.
Yeah.
When you have 50% approval rating in this country for Trudeau, they are okay with it.
Okay. All right. We'll see, Tim. Thank you. But he thinks Mr. O'Toole's doing MIA. How many times have we reached out to that office, leader of the official opposition?
Every week.
Every week, right?
Every week.
Can we get O'Toole on the program? Can we get O'Toole on the program? We're not having a lot of luck. We are having luck getting Michelle Rempel-Garner, and she's the health critic, and she's right on top of things. She's been on the program. She was on twice in 1 week, so no complaints from me when it comes to getting a member of the shadow cabinet. It would be nice to talk to the leader, though. It would be. Do an interview with him. That's it? Okay. Yeah, phone line's closed. Back after the news on the Rob Snow Show. Final hour coming right up here on City News.
Experience Winterlude across Canada. Watch the virtual show exploring Canada's winter traditions. Meet the carvers of Winterlude's first national ice carving competition. Vote online for your favorite sculpture. Celebrate Canada's artistic diversity with Fosia, Ariane Moffat, William Prince, Tracy Trash, Corneille, Ria May, and the incredible Eladj Balde. Join us February 5th at 7 p.m. This is Winterlude.
KIWW 1310 AM in Ottawa.
And CJET 1011 FM in Smiths Falls and the Valley. Number 1 for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 1011 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Wednesday, February 3rd. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, -4. Feels like -12. In Smiths Falls, -5. Feeling like -11. Here's what's making news this hour. Latest provincial COVID numbers are out this morning. 1,172 new cases. These numbers come from 52,400 completed tests. There were also 67 deaths in Ontario over the past 24 hours. After saying there could be fluctuations in Toronto numbers due to a change in their reporting system, that city says it has 444 cases today. In our region, there are 58 new cases in Ottawa, 14 in Eastern Ontario, 4 for Leeds, Grenville, Lanark, and 0 in Renfrew. City News Time, 11:01, and now your forecast. Here's meteorologist Jill Taylor.
Cloudy, continuing windy. The wind out of the north-northwest to about 30 kilometers per hour. Some higher gusts as well. High near -1, feel like -7. Tonight, mainly clear, -9. And tomorrow, lots of sunshine. High again about -1. That's the high today, -1.
And right now in Ottawa, -4. In Smiths Falls, -5 degrees. Federal government is expected to update the official terrorist list today. This could include the far-right group, the Proud Boys. More from City News Parliament Hill reporter Cormac McSweeney.
Ever since the storming of Capitol Hill by Trump supporters in early January, there have been calls to designate the Proud Boys as a terrorist group. Many members of the group, which was founded in Canada, have been arrested and charged for allegedly taking part in and helping organize the riot. Our public safety minister has said he's collecting evidence, and later today he'll be holding a news conference about ideologically motivated violent extremism. Stephanie Carvin, a former government security analyst who now teaches at Carleton University, tells me the Proud Boys likely won't be the only one in the spotlight today.
They are looking into groups like the Order of Nine Angels, like the Adam Watson Division, like the Three Percenters, who are all associated with the far right.
The government has said such a designation will give law enforcement more investigative tools and allow financial institutions to freeze the assets of these groups. Cormac McSweeney, Parliament Hill.
City News Time, 11:03. Ottawa Police Service thanking the public for help in locating a missing 74-year-old man we just told you about last half hour. He has been found safe and sound. Applications now open for Ottawa Police Scholarship. This aims to provide financial assistance for women interested in policing from racialized or Indigenous communities. The scholarship was launched by then Ottawa Police Chief Thomas Flanagan in 1993. Sergeant Avery Flanagan tells City News why his grandfather began this fund.
Ottawa at the time was growing. At the time we lived in Orleans out in the East End, and you saw a diversity all around you. And I think he was just able to understand the concept of policing and community policing and the importance of representation within that community from the police service.
Now, Flanagan says the outreach recruitment team is in charge of the scholarship, and they will provide mentoring to those who win it. A couple of lucky lotto winners in our area. OLG says Vivian Garneau won the second prize in the 649 draw from November 18th. The 68-year-old nurse wins just under $103,000 and says she's still deciding what to do with that cash. Also claiming a prize, Melanie Lagasse of Canada, who matched 6 of 7 encore numbers in the November 20th draw and takes home a prize of $100,000. The 44-year-old personal support worker says she plans to use her winnings on her family, saying, "We all win." I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Firm.
Fair.
Fun.
The Rob Snow Show returns
On Rogers TV and City News 1011 FM.
and 1310 AM.
It's winter time and the weather's fine. The snow on the woods and field when I reveal my snowmobile. Thrill by gully and hill, baby, it'll make you feel like an outdoor meal on a snowmobile. Listen to the sound of the bells go round when the winter carnival's here. And oh, what fun at the crack of the gun when the whole gang disappears. The race is on from the bush to the pond and back where the judges feel you've won their seal.
on everything that's happening up the line. Bruce McIntyre's here from the Eganville Leader. Good morning.
Good morning. Good chilly morning to you, Rob.
Where have we tracked you down?
I'm back home in Renfrew.
Oh, in Renfrew. Okay.
Downtown Renfrew. Yeah. Right outside, and I can guarantee it's minus chilly.
It's minus chilly. Okay. All right. Did you get snow overnight? Or,
I was actually in Ottawa yesterday. I
you were? Okay.
Snow here, but traveled back this morning at 5 a.m. and back home.
It was a southern event, it seems, eh?
Yeah. Well,
So, what's the big story, Bruce?
Well, there's a lot of stories going on. Close to home, I guess, to start with COVID. I'll give you a quick COVID update.
Yeah.
We have some vaccines, not a lot. Like the rest of the province and the country, we got a little shortchanged, and it really threw our plans, not our plans, the county plans, into a bit of a upside down. We have about 800 were doled out. Majority went to long-term care residents. They started in Barry's Bay and worked their way down. And Dr. Robert Cushman, our acting director of health, just make him director. Take away that acting stuff. He's been here 4 years, for goodness sakes. Anyway, he met with a lot of the mayors and reeves to give them an update, and he said once May comes, it's going to be a tsunami of vaccine. He predicts that within 3 weeks, we'll have to vaccinate half the Renfrew County residents who are eligible. So it's going to be a very busy 3 weeks come May, and the question is logistics. How do they do this? Because you need the freezer units, you need just the logistics of doing it. So now they're planning now. So it's good news, bad news. The bad news is
May, right?
May.
You gotta, not that we want a tsunami, but if you're gonna have a tsunami of anything, it should be vaccines. And but it's only February.
I know. Well, we've been fortunate. So. Our numbers are down very low again.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
So we keep our fingers crossed, keep those numbers going, and we'll be able to hold it out till May. So that's our goal.
That's the goal.
And so that's what's happening there. Another fire, unfortunately, up in Petawawa. Very cold day last Thursday. A fire in a garage on the Petawawa Boulevard. RTE Motive Repairs on the boulevard was destroyed, unfortunately. And for your readers, our listeners out there, want to grab a paper, go see what the ice age looks like. Take a look at our photos on page 3. The cars are just looks like something out of a movie. Just the ice, pictures of the ice on the cars that were at the garage when the fire took place.
Yeah, I've always thought about the firefighters whenever we get a really cold snap, and it's minus 20, minus 22, and what it is like to go out and fight a fire in those conditions, and have all that water turn to ice, and how dangerous it can be. I remember, my gosh, I don't know how many years ago it must be. Early to mid 90s, I think it was, on Somerset Street. There was an older Chinese grocery store there called the Kowloon Grocery Store. The Kowloon Grocery Store that's there now is the new one that replaced the old one that burned down. And I remember when it burned down, my gosh, you could see the smoke for miles and miles and miles, and the smell in the air, and it was thick. But watching them fight that fire, because it was cold, like minus 20, minus 25, and it was like the whole front of the building. You could see how it had been gutted, but it was a wall of ice. And your pictures very much in the Eganville Leader of this garage fire very much remind me of that, Bruce. It
was minus 25. They're out there fighting the fire.
Minus 25, yeah. My gosh.
Also mentioned they're volunteers.
Volunteers, yeah.
God bless them.
Yeah, God bless them. You're right. Yeah. So, big road contract awarded. A $25 million Calabogie Road exchange job has been awarded by the province. New interchange at Highway 17 and Calabogie Road. That'll be a big project, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's part of the twinning of the highway between Arnprior and Renfrew. And anyone who's ever tried to turn left on the Highway 17 from Calabogie Road, well, let's just say you better bring a razor and a toothbrush. You'll be sitting there a long time. And when you finally do get across, your odds of getting hit are pretty strong. Yeah. I've gone to, I'd say the last year, I've gone to 4 collisions at that intersection.
Really?
And luckily none of them were fatalities, but it's just a horrible intersection, especially in the summer when you have all the tourists going towards Calabogie, towards the cottages in the area. It's just a nightmare. It really is. So luckily the province has stepped in and they've awarded the contract, and that it cannot come soon enough, I'll tell you. It's going to be a 22.5 kilometers between Arnprior and Renfrew when it's all done. And the Calabogie is the key intersection in the middle. It's going to be a big job, and hopefully I'm still alive when it's done. I get to see it one day. I'm looking forward to it. And it's part of the province's commitment to our Highway 17. It's far overdue. It really is. So we're looking forward to that.
Now, the member of Parliament for much of your leadership is Cheryl Gallant, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yes.
She's been around.
Very popular. She wins big. When she runs, she wins, and she wins big, no doubt about that. But
she's a tsunami. She is a
tsunami. Yeah, she is a tsunami. And she can make you kind of raise your eyebrows a little bit, right, from time to time, and kind of wondering where.
She's been very quiet. She's been very quiet the last year, and all we heard from her are the communiques that are sent out from her office. Each MP is allowed a budgetary amount to send out communiques.
The mailers, they call them, right? Yeah.
And this one that came out, you know what? I don't even look. To be honest, I don't look at them. Honestly, I don't.
Okay. All right.
But this one is call it QAnon light.
Oh no way! Really? Really?
She's making these wild accusations that Trudeau was going to introduce a national state of emergency, which will enable them to come in and confiscate private property.
Ooh,
They're first going to come for your firearms, and then they're going to come for the private property. And it's just
wow.
It's what it is. She's pandering to the base. She's doing fear mongering, and she rallies up the private landowners, which are very strong in this riding.
Yeah.
She gets them all riled up, and when the time comes to vote, they'll be out there front and center. And this has nothing to do with. It's just fabrication. And it's good for Gerald and the leader for calling her to task. It's ridiculous. It's fear mongering. People have enough to deal with the economy and COVID and trying to maintain your jobs without this being thrown at you. It's just ridiculous, and it's called the hidden crackdown. And the national state of emergency would enable him to confiscate other private property you own, which is complete falsehood. And I think Gerald, our leader...
So Cheryl Gallant, a longtime member of Parliament, what's the name of the riding again? Renfrew, Nipissing, Pembroke, right?
Yeah.
Always a little more on the more controversial side of things to begin with. Largely silenced, I think, under Harper, relegated to backbenches and everything else. Yeah. But enormously popular in her own riding. Is in her latest mailing to her constituents is saying Trudeau's going to declare a state of emergency. He's coming for your guns and he's coming for your land.
That's it.
Wow.
So it's as we said in our editorial, this is a time for leadership and advocating for decisive action and not falling back on fear mongering to rallying the base. That's what it is. It's rallying the base. The fundraiser episode is part of the fundraising as well. So I hope the MP considers this when the next mail-out comes out and the information there's no information. That's the problem. There is no information. You don't know what's going on in Parliament. It's just fear-mongering. So it's frustrating for individuals who don't prescribe to that mindset. You're trying to find out what's going on, what your MP is doing in Parliament, and you don't know. It's frustrating that way as well. So hopefully she'll see the editorial, and perhaps the next communique will be a little more positive. That's all we can hope for.
Le Pin Apartments, people may recognize that name here in Ottawa. Is doing a lot of construction in Renfrew, right, Bruce?
They are. They broke ground recently. Le Pin Apartments bringing in luxury apartments, which is fantastic for the not just Renfrew, but all of Renfrew County, because I know myself a few of the farmers have recently retired, and they're trying to sell their land, and they want to downscale. And they're used to a certain level, and they don't want to be in a little apartment, a one-bedroom apartment with nothing really no amenities. So the team got the green light from the town recently, and they broke the ground, and it'll be 6 buildings, luxury style. Basically, it's condos without the condo fees. And it's something completely different, which is the first of its kind in the Ottawa Valley. We've not seen anything like this before. And they're very professional, very well respected, and we're looking forward to seeing those buildings coming up. It also piggybacks on to the real estate, the end of the year real estate numbers that came out. And as we spoke to you many times the past year, Rob, real estate went through the roof in Renfrew County.
Yep.
And I can't wait to see what January numbers are, because I suspect it'll be similar numbers. So.
Now, we had some real estate numbers about rentals here in Ottawa the other day on Monday. We were talking about this, and it was for a two-bedroom apartment in Ottawa. Now, the average price, and David Sally from the Ottawa Business Journal told me if you can get a two-bedroom apartment for $1,500 in Ottawa, grab it. You've got yourself a bargain. What's I don't know if you would even know this, Bruce, like say the average rent for an apartment in Renfrew these days. Is it
a two-bedroom would be less, about $1,000.
About $1,000.
Around that number. And a bachelor or a one-bedroom, about $700. That'd be
$700, okay. All right.
$800, yeah. Most places will include utilities. Unless it's an older home, you may have to pay for the hydro or something, but you can get a two-bedroom for under $1,000.
Two-bedroom under $1,000.
If you can find one, that's the difficulty. It's
really?
Similar to Ottawa, the market is getting smaller. Less money is going into development. Unlike Lapine, that's the only really major, huge development that's gone on as far as apartments in the Ottawa.
That's more higher end, right?
It's higher end, yeah, it is.
Yeah, okay.
But it's worth once you see them, it's worth the money. I'm looking at those apartments myself, Rob.
Well, I'll tell you what, it's the best $2 you'll ever spend is on a copy of the Eganville Leader. It's out today.
And it's hot off the press on a cold day, and I invite your listeners to go and get it. You can get it online or paper delivery. It's up to your listeners.
Thanks, Bruce. We'll talk next week.
Rob.
Yep, Bruce McIntyre from the Eganville Leader. That's Valley View 1117. How are you sleeping at night? Are you sleeping a full 8 hours at night? I'm back to kind of doing the 4 hours here, 4 hours there, wandering around the living room for a few hours in between, doing a little Netflix action.
I'm a big 3 a.m. snack guy.
It's not good for you.
Yeah.
It messes with your circadian rhythms. How do you get a good night's sleep while dealing with COVID disruptions? Rebecca Robillard is the director of the Sleep Research Laboratory at the University of Ottawa, and she'll join us next on City News.
So Rideau Rockcliffe Community Resource Centre has been around since 1982, and it's here to serve residents of Ward 13. So our focus is on helping to reduce poverty in this community, as well as empowering residents to find resilience within themselves. So one of the new focuses of our centre is around food programming. So you'll notice today when we go around on a little tour that we have a number of food programs here at the centre. So one being obviously our emergency food program, which is really great. So residents can come and access food when they are in need. We also have a number of food-based social enterprises here at Rideau Rockcliffe as well. So one being the Ottawa Good Food Box, another being Market Mobile. One of our new initiatives that started this year as response to COVID is called Good Food on the Move, and it's a click and collect online store, and we have 7 pickup locations throughout the city. More sort of local here for Ward 13 residents, we've also started a free produce market as well. So community members can come on Wednesdays and Fridays and be able to access additional free fruits and vegetables.
Social Harvest Ottawa is one of the social enterprises here at the Rideau Rockcliffe Community Resource Centre. We operate this great urban greenhouse, and our work is not only to grow nutritious and delicious food, but also to nourish communities with community members here in Ward 13 and beyond. The greenhouse is a year-round project. We're a team of 4 employees working here. We have 2 full-time employees and 2 part-time employees. We focus on growing microgreens from late fall to early spring, and hothouse crops in the summertime, such as tomatoes and cucumbers.
The Mission Food Truck we're in our 5th week of collaborating with them to come visit our center, and we just got in on it at the right time. They were looking for new communities to branch out to. They said absolutely. Right now they're funded through donations. They travel around Ottawa and just give out delicious, fresh, hot food to people as well. We have at our center the Ottawa Good Food Box, as well as the Market Mobile. So Ottawa Good Food Box has been around for 25 years, and Market Mobile is a little younger, started in 2014. So they both have the mission and the mandate of making fresh food more accessible and affordable in neighborhoods that lack access to a grocery store. So I think the greatest need that we've seen as a result of the pandemic in our community is people that we maybe have never needed to access our services before, right? So a lot of people people have had, layoffs. Maybe they're just not able to work because they have to stay home with their children, over the summer, that sort of thing. So we've definitely seen the need go out, particularly for our food programming, as well as some of our counseling services as well. So it's a heavy time for people emotionally.
Pillar of community opinion.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
How are you sleeping at night? Me, I'm kind of sleeping in shifts these days, like 4 hours here, 4 hours there. Apparently that's not very good for you, and sleep quality has taken a nosedive for a lot of people who are anxious about COVID-19. Daily routines have been disrupted. They could have worries about money and just generally being cooped up. It's causing deteriorating sleep quality. So what are some tips to getting a good night's sleep? Rebecca Robillard joins us, director of the University of Ottawa Sleep Research Laboratory, also an assistant professor, School of Psychology, University of Ottawa. Good morning.
Good morning.
It's very nice to hear from you. I thank you so much for taking the time. How accurate is it to say that people's quality of sleep is suffering because of the pandemic, Professor?
Oh, I think that's no big news or big surprise at this stage. There's a lot of evidence, including our own work, but also internationally, showing that people are struggling to sleep since the start of the pandemic. So it's becoming a very widespread issue at the moment.
Okay. Let's say, we hear a lot about circadian rhythm, right? Circadian rhythm. If somebody had, prior to the pandemic, a normal daily routine, wake up at 6 o'clock, make breakfast for the children, get them ready, get them off to school, then get myself ready for work, go to work, their whole normal daily routine, but none of that is happening now. Can that also mess up your so-called circadian rhythm?
Absolutely. So there's a lot of different factors that are coming to play now to explain why we're not sleeping as good. By the biological clock and our circadian rhythms are certainly some of them. The biological clock that sits in our brain is very important for a broad range of physiological functions to help us have a nice, long, consolidated period of sleep and awake during the daytime as well at the right time. And usually it's, as you're pointing out, it's using a lot of anchors in our daily routine to set itself up, but now we're losing some of these anchors because of the changes that the pandemic is imposing on our daily routine. So we usually use external cues to adjust the timing of our biological clock, notably via our social interactions, the timing of our meals, our exercise patterns, even if that meant just walking from the parking to climbing a few stairs to reach the office, for example. But now a lot of these external cues are kind of altered. Now a lot of us are having to go through a new routine where we're walking from the bed to the computer desk and back in the evening. So unfortunately, we've become more sedentary as well. And one of the biggest external cue that's used by our biological clock to regulate our circadian rhythms is light. And we don't realize it, but the average light that we have at home is much lower than what we're getting outdoors, even on a cloudy day. And as well, also typically much lower than what most of us were using to get in the office space or in the workspace. So a lot of us are getting kind of a lack of light currently as opposed to what we did before the pandemic.
We're not just sleep deprived, we're light deprived.
Yeah.
Great. Wonderful. Okay.
But that's an easy fix, though.
Okay.
I'm highlighting points that we can actively change. Like there's, of course, now a lot of devices that are available to try to get some supplements of light, a little bit like a light vitamin if you want. For example, those light boxes or light glasses now that are available too. But, the sun is your friend there. Like just getting out there, even if it looks a bit gray and it doesn't look that inviting because it's cold, is really providing your brain with a lot of the light that it needs to regulate its sleep, its mood, its cognition as well. So it also helps our intellectual function during the daytime. So yeah, that's an easy fix.
Okay. I hear this term more often now. Sleep hygiene. What does that term mean? Sleep hygiene.
So that's kind of recognizing that a lot of the behaviors that we're doing during the daytime have an influence on our sleep, and a lot of those behaviors we can look after and change and adjust to make sure that we're protecting our sleep. So, things like often it seems obvious to people, sometimes don't think about it, but watching our caffeine consumption, not even that contains tea and chocolate and, things like Coke and Pepsi. So just making sure that we don't use those products in the afternoon or close to bedtime if we have sleep issues. Other things like, making sure that we try to keep some regular sleep schedules, avoiding cigarettes and alcohol as well close to bedtimes. People don't often realize this, because often they help us feel more relaxed, and sometimes people might be tempted even to use take a couple of glasses before bedtime to try to relax, but it's actually harmful for your sleep, and cigarettes, for example, do have that kind of anxiolytic effect and helps us settle down, but at the same time it's a stimulant for the brain, so it's actually kind of not helping with sleep afterwards. So
what about screens? What about screens, Professor? Phone screens and tablets. How does that...
Yeah, the list is pretty long in terms of factors. It's not possible to cover everything, but screens are another big one, and that's actually also coming out in our research right now. People, I guess because we're stuck at home, there's increased TV time and increased time that we spend on our computers and tablets, and all of those devices are little lamps, if you want. They're providing light to our eyes, and this, as I was mentioning, can be a good thing, but the timing of our light exposure is critical. So light in the morning is very helpful to help resynchronize our biological clock, but light in the evening actually suppresses our sleep hormones like melatonin, which are very important for us to be able to get in a zone, for our brain to get in a zone that's conducive to sleep. So by essentially increasing our screen time, especially before bedtime when our melatonin should be rising naturally, we're suppressing our natural urge to fall asleep.
Okay. Where are you on naps, afternoon naps? I'm kind of a big fan myself, but what do you...
Yeah, naps are kind of a tricky thing. It's a bit of a double-edged sword. They can be very helpful and beneficial to recharge and optimize how we're functioning during the daytime. It helps with concentration. We know very well now that it helps with memory processes. For example, if you're trying to learn something and take a nap, you'll be much better at performing afterwards in terms of retrieving that information after sleeping. It also helps with mood. So there's a lot of positive virtues. But if we're having issues sleeping at night, then naps can actually be harmful. So naps not so much recommended for people who have disorders like insomnia, for example, because what naps do is that they actually help us release some of what we call the homeostatic sleep drive, so that sleep pressure that we build up the more time we spend awake. And so when you take a nap, you're starting to dissipate this, and this might affect your ability to fall asleep later on. So the biggest trick is that if you do want to take a nap, the best thing is to take it as early as possible during the daytime, so that you can accumulate more sleep pressure, and watch the timing of your nap as well in terms of the duration of the nap. So, 15, 20 minutes naps are good, or even 90 minutes naps if you can afford it. So it's important to set the alarm to not oversleep.
Okay. I just have one quick question here.
Yeah.
I have been told there's no such thing as being able to catch up on sleep. Is that true? You can't catch up on your sleep.
It's not exactly true. I mean, there's this kind of gray area where sometimes people sleeping too much or spending too much time in bed and not necessarily sleeping can install some negative thoughts about the bedroom and about the sleep environment and make sleep more aversive. But at the same time, if there is this widespread recognition that a lot of us were sleep deprived even before the pandemic started, and for some of us, because of the kind of the lift off that on our schedules that the the confinement is putting on. So sometimes some of us don't have to wake up that early in the morning, and so we can actually catch back on sleep. It's actually a pretty good thing. So I would encourage people to take advantage of that. And this is certainly something that we're seeing, that those people who are able to actually either maintain the same level of sleep that they had before the pandemic, or catch up and get a bit more sleep because they're able to sleep in the morning, they're actually better off also in terms of their mental health and their psychological response to the pandemic.
Thank you. Very helpful to hear from you today. Thank you again.
No worries. And I just want to throw off as well, there's a lot of more information about sleep and the pandemic on a nice website from the Canadian sleep community, which is called Sleep On It Canada.
Sleep On It Canada. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Professor.
A pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Sleep.
Rebecca Robillard is the director of the Sleep Research Laboratory at the University of Ottawa and is an assistant professor in the School of Psychology at the University of Ottawa. Daniel Blaikie is an NDP MP. We're going to talk about those vaccine contracts coming right up on City News.
News in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Wednesday, February 3rd. Good morning. I'm Sarah Buck, and right now in Ottawa, cloudy skies, -4. It's -4 in Smiths Falls. Here's what's making news this hour. Ontario reports 1,172 new cases of COVID-19 and 67 new deaths due to the virus. The trend of resolved cases outstripping new cases is continuing. Public Health Ontario reporting 58 new cases for Ottawa. Yesterday, the health unit confirmed 27. Elsewhere, locally, no new cases for Renfrew County and District, 4 for Leeds, Grenville, Lanark, and 14 for Eastern Ontario. Ontario is going to launch a new autism services program in March, starting with 600 children. That program will provide children with needs-based supports, including applied behavior analysis, speech language pathology, and occupational therapy. Social Services Minister Todd Smith says the program will expand throughout the year to include 8,000 more children by the end of this year. For children not included in the new program, the government will expand interim funding made available in 2019 to pay for eligible services. The new autism services program was supposed to launch in April of last year, but Smith announced in late 2019 it would instead be phased in over 2 years. He says the pandemic slowed plans for the phased-in implementation and added the government would be able to refine the program once it starts next month. And COVID across the river in Quebec. Quebec reporting 1,053 new COVID infections for 2 straight days. The health officials there have 37 more deaths attributed to novel coronavirus, 9 in the past 24 hours. There are 10 new cases in the Outaouais. I'm Sarah Buchan for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
He's the opinionated Ottawa icon.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Home stretch of the program. Vaccines back in focus. Vaccine nationalism. What's going on with the EU? What's happening in Montreal with the NRC facility there? Let's welcome Daniel Blaikie to our program. New Democrat member of Parliament, Elmwood-Transcona, Manitoba, riding. Good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, very nice to hear from you. And let me. You're on the House of Commons Trade Committee, right?
That's right. Yeah.
That committee, members of that committee, have asked to see contracts. Am I right? Related to vaccine procurement?
Yeah, we've been saying, a number of us on the committee have been saying that the government should be more forthcoming about some of the terms and conditions in the contracts that they've negotiated for vaccines.
And what response have you received?
Well, the kind of usual that unfortunately people have come to expect from the government, which is just a kind of flat no, and they're saying, that there's this and that reason, but we do know that other countries have released more information about their contracts, and I think, but when we talk about transparency and accountability generally, I think it goes beyond just the details of the contracts. I also asked a committee of the minister, did you ask to be on the list of exempt countries from these new European Union provisions? And we couldn't get an answer to that. We asked, did you get an explanation from the European Union on why Canada isn't on that list of exempt countries? We didn't get an answer to that. Okay. So it's not just about the kind of legal details of these contracts. It's about the approach in general. The government continues to say, just trust us, just trust us. We're doing the best that can be done.
We're kind of being asked to take this.
Answer direct questions about what they're doing.
Yeah, I'm sorry to jump the gun there. We're kind of being, Canadians are being asked to take a leap of faith, aren't they, Mr. Blaikie?
Well, they are, and I just don't think that really cuts it. I do think that we are owed a better explanation of what the government at least is trying, and when we're talking about international partners like the European Union, I think we should know how our government is advocating and what specifically it's advocating for, and those are the kinds of answers that we haven't gotten. And so then that makes it really hard to have that confidence that the government is doing everything it can do, because it's not really telling us what it's doing. It's just telling us to be reassured and to trust them. And I'm thinking about all the Canadians who listened to the government months ago when they were in financial distress. And the government said, well, apply to serve in good, as long as you apply in good faith, you're not going to be persecuted later. And about 400,000 Canadians got a letter in December saying, we're thinking we want the money back.
Coming after you.
And even though we said at the time you qualified, you don't qualify now. I mean, anybody who got one of those letters is probably looking at this government and saying, yeah, I'm not going to, go for the just trust us line twice in a row. And the vaccine rollout is really important. So, we need more from the government on what specifically they're doing and what specifically they're asking for from our allies, and better explanations as to why they're not getting it. And what we could be doing.
Well, I think just kind of reporter's curiosity. I would like to know what the government has signed us up for.
For sure.
What does the opposition want to know? For example, if you're asking to see contracts for those contracts to be publicly released, what kind of details would you like to know? For example.
Well, I'd like to know. I'd like to have a better sense, to the extent that we've heard some reports that the EU might have undertaken these measures because there were some countries that were offering higher prices, for instance, for larger and faster deliveries. Those kinds of plays may have given rise to what's going on. So I'd like to understand better what the EU's concerns are and why Canada didn't make it onto that exempt list of countries, and whether some of the ways our government has been behaving might have helped spur some of these initiatives. And it's just impossible to know with the information that we actually have. And it's a particularly pressing issue for Canada because the government will say there are other countries who are not on that exempt list, like the U.S. and Australia. But what sets them apart from Canada is that they each have their own domestic vaccine production capability, and Canada's not there yet. We just heard an announcement from the government that I think was supposed to mollify Canadians, but the fact is that that domestic vaccine production doesn't sound like it's going to be online until at least the end of this year. So, this is something that they should have been moving on a lot more quickly. It's something that when you hear the government officials speak, they talk a lot about, protecting global supply chains and this great faith in globalized trade. But Canada has been quite naive under Liberal and Conservative governments for the last 30 years. We've been dealing with other countries who have been talking free trade when it suits their interests, but have also been doing the work at home to make sure that on essential things like vaccine production, they have a domestic plan, that they're not leaving it to global supply chains. Canada stands alone in being kind of naive, frankly, when it comes to getting invested in the global trade agenda, instead of making sure that we do still have domestic manufacturing capabilities for essential things.
It would seem, I don't know, at least when it comes to the United States and to a certain extent the UK and the EU with AstraZeneca and the EU, parts of that contract were released to the public. Details of the AstraZeneca EU contract. Both the U.S. government's supply contracts with Moderna and Pfizer, they're on the internet, Mr. Blaikie.
Yeah.
I mean, they're publicly available, so it does make you wonder, do they have something to hide? That's just human nature, is to wonder, what's in there? If you're not willing to release it. It's kind of like the We Charity thing all over again.
Well, and these are the questions that come up, and the best way to answer them is to release as much information as possible. I would say, part of the problem is that this is a long-standing culture within the Canadian government. I mean, often if you talk about the negotiations we had for the Canada-Europe Trade Agreement, for instance, you could read whole sections of the Canada-Europe Trade Agreement on the websites of governments we were negotiating with long before the Canadian government released any information about what was being negotiated. And they would say, well, these are trade secrets, it's really important. And then you could just go to the other government's website and read it. That was true for TPP too. So, our government has frankly just far too exaggerated a notion of what's private and confidential, and is far less willing to share important information with its citizens than a lot of our partner countries.
Yeah.
So
you would accept.
It's hard to have confidence in them that they are really only sharing, what they absolutely can, or keeping private what they absolutely must, when there's this track record of denying information to Canadians about international trade issues when trading partners are publishing the same stuff online. It's ridiculous. And I think, part of managing our way properly through this public health crisis is continuing to make sure that Canadians have the confidence they need in their government, and information sharing is a big part of that. So I think we need to understand more about the terms and conditions of our contracts. For instance, to what extent has Canada negotiated the right to produce some of these vaccines domestically if we have the capability? And it's not clear that Canada has that in a number of cases. So we've just read now in this recent announcement that for one of the newer vaccines that hasn't yet been approved, they do have the right to manufacture domestically, and they are moving ahead with that. Well, that's great. What about all the other vaccines?
Right.
And why haven't we been moving on this sooner? That's some of the kind of information we might expect to glean from the contract without getting into the commercially sensitive.
Right. You would be willing to accept certain redactions for trade secrets and these sorts of things, obviously.
Yeah, I think everyone understands that there will be certain things that are redacted, and for many countries they've released versions with some redactions, but the Canadian government has really given up nothing at all, and it's hard to believe that there is no way that they could be sharing any of these details when the same companies they're dealing with clearly have an understanding with other countries that they can share some of those details. So, did Canada just get a deal that stinks so bad? that they don't want to share it.
Right.
There's no way to know unless we get some information about these deals. At least it would allow us to compare apples to apples for the purchase agreements of other countries that are publicly available.
Okay. I thank you for your time. It's a great pleasure. Yeah, bye-bye.
Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah,
bye-bye.
That's Daniel Blaikie. New Democrat MP, Elmwood-Transcona, Manitoba. 11:45, we'll be right back on The Rob Snow Show on City News.
Let's pretend.
I'm blessed to be married to someone who is a scientist and spent a lot of time following what was happening over in China ahead of time. So he did give us the heads up that this was coming. Not that we believed him right off the bat, but when it did happen very, very quickly, we were prepared. We had hand sanitizer and we were set up to not close our doors. So we locked the kitchen down at Wellington Street, but we left this kitchen open. We put in protocols immediately. We only allowed our very small crew of 4 or 5 people in at the time. No deliveries were allowed to come in or out of the building without, they just weren't allowed in and out of the building. So we met them at the loading dock and had very strict protocols in place right away. We had masks and hand sanitizer and the whole thing. So we're very lucky from that perspective, and we're able to, learn as we went as far as doing small, individually packed caterings, the frozen soup program, food for the Ottawa mission. So we didn't have to close the kitchen and then learn how to reopen it. We just were able to modify and shift as we needed to. Because of our partnership with the Ottawa mission, we were able to very quickly help support them. They were able to send us some product and some supplies, so it wasn't a burden on our business, and we were able to supply the staffing and the packaging to help produce that when they needed it the most. And we produced about 1,400 meals a week to complement their meals, and we started our soup program right away. We realized very quickly that there was a need in the community to get together and all work together, not only to support local, but also just to support all the people that were suddenly in a position of, being locked down and not being able to get out. So by starting that soup program, our community, our clients got online and started making donations for the soups, and we were able to produce the soups and get them back out to people that needed it. We're right now currently making 150 liters of soup per week, but we've made, I would say, 5,000 or 6,000, easily since the pandemic. Probably more. I'd have to do the math, but lots. I think everybody in the city has to be very aware of how blessed we were to have great weather this summer and people were able to get out and about, and that's going to shift. So we do have to be much more aware of who our most vulnerable is, and I really think we have to work together as groups. There are so many organizations in the city that are doing something and contributing and working together, and I think it doesn't matter who, but see what you can do to just step up and help them, whatever it is, whether it's driving or delivering food, or someone has extra zucchini in their garden, or if they can afford to donate some money to any of these organizations. I just think we all have to work together. We're smarter and wiser than we were the first time.
He's the opinionated Ottawa icon.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
What went wrong, fiscally speaking, for the province of Newfoundland and Labrador? There's a new report about that. It's from the C.D. Howe Institute. It has been co-authored by Don Drummond, the Stauffer Dunning Fellow in Global Public Policy, adjunct professor at the School of Policy Studies, Queen's University. Good morning, Professor Drummond.
Good morning to you.
Yeah, it's very nice to hear from you.
Thank you.
What went wrong for Newfoundland and Labrador? You trace it back to 2012, 2013. What was happening then?
Well, of course, we could go right back to Confederation, or at least when Newfoundland and Labrador joined Canada. We won't go that far. We only have a certain amount of time. But they have historically been inclined to deficits. But they weren't in bad fiscal shape as the beginning of the 2010s decade. And then in 2012, 2013, they slipped into deficit. And then, of course, they really got hammered, as did other oil producers in late 2014, 2015, with the decline in oil prices. At one time, their offshore oil royalties were almost $3 billion a year, and they're only estimated to be $500 million this year. But when the royalties soared to $3 billion, they essentially spent the proceeds. They increased largely the number of people working for the government and the pay of the people that are working for the government, and they've largely kept that spending structure in place as the offshore royalties have declined, hence creating this imbalance. And then, of course, like every other jurisdiction in Canada, got hammered again by COVID, but COVID certainly didn't begin the fiscal problems.
How likely is it that Newfoundland and Labrador was already on an unsustainable fiscal footing even before COVID?
Oh, I think absolutely it was on unsustainable fiscal footing before that. It had a very high debt ratio. It was paying about 15 cents of every revenue dollar they collected went to pay an interest on the public debt. So it's pretty hard to run a government when you take money from people and you only give 85 cents of it for every dollar back to goods and services. That makes it tough. And then, of course, they've got the debt from Muskrat Falls hanging over their heads. In theory, that is supposed to be addressed through electricity prices, but that would require a doubling of electricity prices. So in addition to all the other economic challenges, that would just really cripple the economy of the province. And then if they don't cover for the electricity prices, I mean, they have to cut it for taxes, and their tax burden is already fairly high. So, yeah, they had numerous problems. And, of course, this is the lesson, really, that COVID shows you, that crises do happen, and you want to be in reasonably good shape when you're not in crises so you can handle the crises, and they were not in that good shape before COVID hit them and everyone else.
Professor Drummond, I use the term bailout. When the Bank of Canada had to step in, as it did, and buy the provincial bonds from the government of Newfoundland and Labrador because it was having trouble selling them in the bond market, in the international bond market. I call that a bailout. How would you describe it? Is that an accurate term in your opinion?
No, certainly not the Bank of Canada's action. They were buying them, but still interest has to be paid. It's just paid to somebody else. It just ensured that there was a liquid market. That didn't really save anybody. Okay. We actually never had a federal bailout. There was discussion of that way back in 1992 with Saskatchewan. It appeared to be literally on bankruptcy, but then Roy Romano made his famous trip to New York and came back, and he says, never will little boys in short pants tell the people of Saskatchewan what to do, and he just took an axe to everything, closing hospitals and the like. The federal government did some accommodating measures. They gave them some upfront money to buy out the federal interest in New Grade, and maybe something like that will be in order, but we don't have a history of federal bailouts because, of course, we don't have a history of provinces going bankrupt.
Okay. You point to, in your report, public sector compensation costs, particularly in health and public administration, major contributors to higher than average spending when compared to other provinces. Can you give us an idea of how Newfoundland and Labrador compared to other provinces?
Yeah, so if we rewind the clock to the early 1990s, spending per capita in total in Newfoundland and Labrador was pretty much dead on the Canadian average. And then it comes back to that story that departed from the Canadian average when the offshore royalties started to come in. We cite health in particular because, of course, that's, as with every other province, that's the largest spending, but it was pretty much across the board. There was many years in the 2010s where their spending per capita was about 30% higher than the Canadian average, and it's come down a little bit more recently, but it's still very high. Now, there's one argument why it might be a bit on the high side, and of course, relative to other places in Canada, that they do have a very scattered population, and you can imagine it's very hard to run a healthcare system when you have a small number of people. You definitely have economies of scale, or in that case, you don't have economies of scale. But to get to that magnitude was really unsustainable right across the board. And while they don't have as scattered a population in other respects, the maritime provinces are relatively similar to Newfoundland and Labrador, but their spending is fairly close to the Canadian average. So when you look at all their economic parameters, that level of spending relative to other Canadian provinces is really the thing that stands out higher, in fact, than Alberta, even when Alberta did seem to have the economic might to finance it.
So what course of action should be taken, do you think, with, say, a goal in mind of having a balanced budget by 2025-26, 2025-2020.
Unfortunately, I have to emphasize that the goal of a balanced budget in 2025-26 would just be an interim goal. That would still leave their debt ratio quite high, and it would still leave a lot of their revenue dollars going to pay on interest in the public debt. So they're going to have to get to that balanced budget and stay something like a balanced budget or even surpluses for quite a period after that. But to get to the balanced budget, they're going to have to knock a couple of $100 million off their level of spending. So in part, that will be natural because hopefully the pandemic settles down at some point and you can unwind the pandemic-related spendings. But above and beyond that, they're going to have to knock a couple of $100 million off. We're not talking about billions. I don't think it's an insurmountable task, but it's a difficult task. And it's one, if you look at successes, I mentioned Saskatchewan, if you look at the federal government in the mid-1990s, Ontario, there was a public constituency to support the move to restraint. That has to be there in order for this to come, and that takes a government to acknowledge the problem, put out a plan, build some support, and I'm not quite sure those conditions are in place right at the moment. I mean, we have an election where it doesn't seem to be much on anybody's radar.
This unsustainable track that you write about, how unique is Newfoundland and Labrador among the provinces in being on an unsustainable fiscal track?
Well, at the moment, they're certainly the worst. The turn for the worst was just as pronounced in Alberta, but of course it wasn't that long ago. Alberta had a net asset position, so they haven't sunk to that kind of debt. Other provinces are in dire shape. I mean, Ontario, for quite a while, been sort of a 30% net debt GDP ratio. They, like the federal government, have jumped over 50%. New Brunswick is probably not that far, and the fiscal challenges behind Newfoundland and Labrador. They don't have that same level of spending, but they have difficulties as well. And the common denominator, of course, in all of these places is with their older populations, their growth prospects aren't that high. Newfoundland and Labrador probably won't grow more than about 0.5% a year for quite a long time, given the structure of their population and what that means for a declining labor force. And of course, they have a net out-migration of skilled in education. They do have a pretty good education system, but a lot of those people leave. So, you got to work on both sides of it. They do need that fiscal restraint, but they do need to take actions to bolster their economic growth. And other provinces are not in that much better shape.
Okay. On that cheery note, thank you, Mr. Drummond.
Okay, you're
nice
welcome.
to hear from you. That is these days Professor Don Drummond, the Stauffer Dunning Fellow, Global Public Policy Professor at the School of Policy Studies, Queen's University.
The Rob Snow Show.
Weekdays at 9 on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Number one for local news in Ottawa and the Valley.
The Ottawa... This program is brought to you by Ignite TV.